Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto was immortal in My Little Pony. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by pudgypudge, link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. Dear Diary. I've never kept a journal before. I've never had to. But last night I had a dream. A dream too vivid to forget. Last night was the 100th anniversary of my sister's banishment, and on that night I always have bad dreams, but I never remember them. I never remember any of my dreams. I remember this one. But I don't know if it is good or bad. In the dream, I walked on and on through a thick fog, wide and muggy. I could feel it stick to my wings and coat as I walked. For hours it seemed I walked, aimlessly drifting through nothingness. I heard no sound from my steps for there was no ground. It was unnerving. Finally, in the distance, if there was such a thing as distance there, I could see a shape, small and black through the haze. I ran toward it, hoping it would have answers, whatever it may be. I stopped within a few feet of the creature and stared down. It was a small foal. A tiny, rust-orange earth pony with a blonde spiky mane. Around its eyes were very light, almost invisible red markings, like those of a raccoon. I took a step forward and froze immediately. This small creature looked so wizened. As if the weight of the world was upon its shoulders. It was curled into a ball with its nose pressed against its flank. It looked pitiful. It looked weary. Tired. Sad. It made my heart hurt to look at it. He's beautiful, isn't he? I stood to my full height, spread my feet slightly, and demanded that whoever was there come out. Silence reigned in the mist for a few moments before the voice spoke again. He's beautiful, isn't he? It sounded mournful and proud and altogether sad. Like a mother would pine for a lost child. I turned back to the foal and took another glance. He was beautiful, I replied. A perfect creature. The mist seemed to recede a little, and I could detect a hint of happiness. He always was. Beautiful. Strong. Strong of body, of character, of morals, that's why he deserves this. I asked what he deserved. You only live twice. The good die young, the old die gracefully, and legends never truly die. But he never had that chance. That's why he deserves to live twice. I was afraid. Afraid of what the voice was saying. What was I in the presence of? A god. It spoke of this little colt like it was its child. I asked as such and received a small laugh. Of course he is my child. A special child. A flame against darkness that burned out before its time. That's why I give him to you. But why, I asked. To maintain peace. This child has fought all his life for peace. I looked at the small thing before me. All its life. It couldn't be more than a year old. 2 at most. I voiced my disbelief. Do not try to understand everything or you will understand nothing. Believe when I say that this child has fought his entire life to bring peace to his people. It was his master's wish and his desire. He fulfilled it, but he was not allowed to enjoy peace. To maintain peace. To know peace. That is why I give him to you. My mouth felt dry. And I asked why, once more, he was given to me. The voice indulged me. I give him to you, to your land, as a protector, for that is what he is. Tell me, young one, what is the essence of harmony? Loyalty. Laughter. Generosity. Honesty. Kindness. Magic. I knew these by heart. The voice seemed pleased by my answer, but. All are true. But these are needed to maintain peace. What is needed to make peace? I didn't want to answer. I was beginning to understand what the voice meant. I refused to answer. Tell me. What is necessary? What is it that makes this child special? I swallowed hard. My voice cracked as I stared once more at the young fool, his tiny features weighted with what I could see now. Responsibility. Dedication. Servitude. Yes, servitude. My voice choked. Sacrifice, I said. Yes. Sacrifice. This little one has always sacrificed himself. His happiness. His body. His soul. All for the well-being of others. It's time he found the peace he deserves. But sacrifice is all he knows. It's engraved in his very essence. That is why he will protect harmony. The elements of harmony? I asked. Yes. Peace must be fought for. Harmony is the goal. Sacrifice will maintain. He sleeps now, to regain his strength. He will awaken one day and I will send him to you. You must show him the way of your world. The way of peace. My world? It sounded like this fool would have no idea what he was. He will be confused. He will not know, but you must show him. Help him down the path to his own peace. I will send him to you when he awakes. What is his name? I inquired. The voice seemed to swell up with pride and joy, and I could feel love in its presence as it spoke. Naruto. Dear Diary. It has been so many years since I last wrote of that dream. The dream with the young colt. I had almost forgotten about it. Tonight is the anniversary of my sister's imprisonment and I write in you again. I dare say this was less a dream and more a premonition. I believe my previous dream to be one as well. In this dream, I walked in the mist again, but this time, I knew where to go. Soon, I came upon the little fool again, unchanged from the last time I saw him, except for his eyes. The red around his eyes was darker now and more realized. He looked complete. And this time he was awake. And not alone. Sitting beside him was the strangest creature I have ever seen. It was smooth. And pale. Its mane was long and luxurious and red, but it had no coat. Its style of dress was unlike anything I've seen. But as I approached, it smiled at me, as it used its strange appendage, like a monkey's arm, to stroke the little colt. He's beautiful, isn't he? My little Naruto. My breath hitched when he opened his eyes. Oh, how blue they were. Like tiny oceans, bottomless and unending. He blinked at me and looked at her. She smiled sadly and stroked his mane again. This is who will be taking care of you. She will show you the way. Do not fear. Do you understand? He nodded and struggled to his feet as if he'd never stood before. Towering over him, I realized how tiny he looked. How frail. How powerful. His head held high, he looked me square in the eye and I could feel it. Power. Protection. The power to protect. Then his head dipped low and he bowed before me. The female creature behind him smiled and stood up, dusting her dress as she did. He will find you, princess. This is his chance to know peace. Please help him along. What is he to you? I had to know. This small bundle entrusted to me. I felt protected and wanted to protect him as well. It was conflicting. The red-maned creature smiled at me, a large smile that I would come to know well in the coming years. He's my son. My beloved son. My Naruto. Celestia let the quill fall to the table and closed the diary with a small thump. 2 dreams. In hundreds of years, she had only remembered 2 dreams. The dreams of the little colt and the red-maned female. With a sigh, she stood and walked to her chamber door, intent on a walk to clear her mind. 4 guards made a box formation around her and they were off through Canterlot. Her mind was not with her as she smiled at the people of the city. They bowed as she walked past, waiting until the tip of her tail was gone before rising. Would the premonition come true? Or was it simply her mind playing tricks on her? It couldn't be. She could never imagine such a creature as in her dream. And then she saw a small rust-orange blob coming down the cobblestone street, its small hooves clacking along. It held its head high as it headed straight for her, and for the first time in a long time, the princess was dumbfounded. It was the little colt from her dream. Pony stopped and whispered as he continued toward the princess unabashed. What was a small pony doing in Canterlot on its own? An earth pony, no less. The guards tensed when she stopped and stared, only to find a little foal walking toward them. The youngest guard in the rear, a Pegasus, sneered and started forward, only to be stopped by the oldest guard in the group, a unicorn. The unicorn shook his head and ambled in front of the princess, intent on teaching the boy manners. Son, I know you're young, but you must respect your princess. Step aside and bow and let us be on our way. The little foal glanced up at him, snorted, and walked right past, right up to Celestia's feet. She looked down into his eyes and immediately felt at peace. He had finally arrived. She began to smile warmly when the youngest guard stepped forward and began to berate the little colt loudly. She hadn't realized how quiet things had gotten on the street until that moment. Everyone was staring. Just as she was about to reprimand the guard, she noticed those big blue eyes narrow. The guard never knew what hit him. It took only a second for tiny legs to buck upward and send the guard flying several feet backwards. Not so impressive except for the fact that this was a trained royal guard and the attacker was a small colt. A gasp rang throughout the streets and the guard scrambled to his hooves, intent on teaching the little one a lesson in respect. Stop. A single quiet command echoed through the stones of the city, stopping everything in its path. Celestia bent her head down to meet the big blue eyes of her subject. He didn't flinch, meeting her gaze entirely. She smiled. It would seem destiny was not simply a roll of the die. Hum along, Naruto. Your lessons begin tomorrow. She turned. He followed. How many years had it been since he had come to the palace? Nearly 20, she figured. Time didn't matter when you were nigh immortal. Time marched on. Ponies aged. Ponies passed on. But she never did. She was always there. An observer in time. And she observed better than anyone else. Naruto was a quick study. He knew nothing of pony language. Or mannerisms. Or culture. But he was a quick study. Very quick. Especially when it came to being a fighter. A protector. She estimated he was about 5 years old when he walked into her life. By the age of 6, he was able to hold conversations with any pony he talked to. He was polite. He was calm, quiet, erudite. She taught him manners, culture, and the ways of noble pony life. He hated it. He was a free spirit at heart, but he was well behaved. He never wanted to embarrass her. It was when she introduced him to the guardsman that she saw his talent in full effect. His mother, for that is what she had said she was correct. He was strong. He was equipped for battle. This little pony had fought before. She could see it when he moved, and it saddened her to some degree that one so young would know of battle. By the age of 7, he was holding his own against the new recruits. By 8, he was beating them. By 9, he was learning against the more experienced soldiers. By 10, he was a royal guardsman, the youngest ever and the only earth pony in her court guard. She didn't see him much after that for a few years. But she was proud of him. And he looked so cute in his custom-made small armor. The thought still made her laugh. She was a princess and the caretaker of the sun and moon. Military matters were left to her advisors and the captains of her guard. She still had final say, but she trusted their judgment. So when they presented her new bodyguard to her, she was shocked and happy. The newest lieutenant was her bodyguard, the colt she had taken in and mentored, Naruto. He bowed low before her and she bid him rise with a smile. He gave her a small smile back and everything was right with the world. He was a wonderful bodyguard. Dutiful and stoic while on duty. Behind closed doors, he was the sweet colt she had practically raised. Polite and mature beyond his years. But then, he would be. He wasn't what he seemed, was he? When pressed for a reward for making it so far, so young, he had only one request. He wanted rid of the helmet he was made to wear. Too restrictive, he said. All he asked for was a different headpiece. That night she had a dream again. It was another one of those creatures, like the red-maned one, but this one had a white mane, and he was huge. He towered over her. But his eyes were kind, and the red tear marks under them helped her see that. The dream ended when he took the headband off his forehead and presented it to her with a charming grin. Tell him to wear it with pride. Tell him I'm proud of him. She commissioned it right away the next morning, down to the exact detail. The strange markings, the horns, the red cloth. It was all the same. He had loved it. He had bowed low as she tied it around his forehead with her magic. Thanked her profusely. His vigor to fulfill his duty returned tenfold. She had nothing to fear with him around. One point of contention was that he had yet to receive his cutie mark on his flank. The other guards teased him good-naturedly about it and he took it in stride, but she could tell it bothered him. She assured him that he simply had not found his calling yet and he adamantly rebuked that, saying that his place was at her side. It made her happy to hear that. But all good things come to an end. She was a monarch, but she couldn't rule the hearts and souls of her subjects. Greed and envy run deep in the hearts of all creatures. She knew before he even came into her chamber. Today was the day he would go away, out into that cold wide world. Her protege, her constant companion, her. She didn't know what he was at times. She knew for certain he didn't belong in the castle though. He belonged to their world. He belonged to nature, to Equestria. The walls confined him. She had heard the murmurs of several of her guards, including the captains. How the lowly little earth pony was only advancing because of his proximity to the princess. How his strength was unnatural. His ability in a fight too controlled for a pony of his age. He'd been accused of being several things. Changeling, worst among them. But he'd borne it in stride. Too proud to bend to their whispers. But she could see that it hurt him. It haunted him. He only wanted to serve the kingdom, to serve her. Such was sacrifice. Celestia threw her head back and looked at the ceiling with a sigh, dreading what was to come. The door creaked and in walked her bodyguard, ears and tail drooping, his armor gone. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. It was just an hour ago that he was called into his commanding officer's office. He'd never been called in for anything other than a commendation of service by the previous captain, an old unicorn who valued service and honor above all. He'd sadly retired 2 years ago, having given half his life to his country and princess. The new captain did not mesh well with him. Do you know why I've called you here, Lieutenant? Standing at attention, Naruto stared straight ahead into his captain's eyes. No sir. I've heard disturbing reports of uncalled-for behavior unbefitting an officer of the court. I am displeased by this, Lieutenant. Naruto's face betrayed nothing, but inside his mind was racing. He'd been warned by his princess that this day might come. His youth and closeness to royalty would work against him in palace politics. I have no knowledge of what you speak, sir. Harassing palace guests. Consorting with unknown parties. Collusion. Bribery. Need I go on, Lieutenant? Do you have proof, sir? I do. Several signed affidavits confirming your whereabouts and the identities of your co-conspirators. I thought better of you than this. Leaning forward on his desk, the captain glared at the young earth pony. I don't like you, Lieutenant. I didn't like you when you were a fresh recruit, I don't like you now. Your service up till now has been exemplary though. That's why these reports disturb me highly. You're the only earth pony in the military right now. Most don't bother. But you have a gift, a very special gift. That's why you were allowed to join. The chair he sat in spun and the captain faced outside, overlooking the courtyard. Their strength and agility are astounding. Your ability to tap into the magic of nature is nothing short of a miracle. You have advanced quickly through the ranks, but you've made no friends doing it. And you're certainly not one to play politics. He spun back around to face the rust-orange stallion and put his hooves together in front of his face. In respect for your service to your country, I am cutting you a break. You are to be honorably discharged, despite what I have on you. The evidence is all against you, and I have the paperwork filled out from the other captains of the guard. It takes 2 of us 3 to make the decision to remove an officer of the court. You are hereby stripped of rank. Naruto felt his heart sink. Being a guard was all he knew. Stripped of title. Stripped of authority. I want your office in the barracks cleaned out by the end of the day. I want you out of my city by morning. I won't have a disgraced soldier mucking up my city or my guard. Naruto's teeth were grinding. Why now? He'd done nothing wrong. This was a setup. As he opened his mouth to speak, the captain gave him a smug grin. If it were up to me, you'd be out on your ear now, dishonorably discharged from service. Like I said, I never liked you. I didn't like you when you kicked me the first time and embarrassed me in front of the princess. I don't like you now. I don't know if the reports are true or hearsay, and frankly, I don't care. It gets you out of my mane. Turn in your armor now. The rust-orange pony was visibly shaking by now. He'd been warned. He didn't want to believe it though. Didn't want to believe this level of pettiness existed here. With a quick shrug and a few tugs of his teeth, his armor clattered to the ground. The captain sneered and held out his hoof. The headband as well. All effects. Now. No. The captain's eyes shone with anger. I said now. Soldier. Naruto merely turned and walked to the door, the forehead protector still in place. He looked over his shoulder at his former captain, the red around his eyes suddenly seemed to be deeper, and his blue eyes shone. I'm not one of your goddamn soldiers anymore. Discharged, remember? And this headband doesn't belong to you. Sir. Don't you dare. Before anything else could be said, the door was blasted away by a quick blow from Naruto's right forehoof. Debris scattered everywhere, ponies of all sorts went flying, dodging stone and wood. Naruto stepped into the hall and spit on the tile, heading off to grab his personal effects before saying goodbye to the one person he cared about. The captain sat at his desk in a cold sweat, nervously mopping at his head with a handkerchief. The head captain of Luna's guards poked his head in and took a seat at one of the chairs that wasn't knocked over. He'd been listening to the conversation outside. I hope you and the head captain of the town guard are satisfied. You've just lost our military a valuable contribution. That young stallion was a beacon to the townsfolk and most of the palace servants. Naruto's former captain growled and stood up from his desk. I'm glad he's gone. Maybe now things can get back to normal. Earth ponies don't belong in our ranks anyway. That'll change quick, Captain. Mark my words. You've just opened a door to policy change around here. Better hope you're around to see it. I had nothing against that colt. He was a good soldier. And more importantly, favored by the princess herself. Bowing low before Princess Celestia, Naruto kept his eyes closed to avoid her gaze. She noticed that he had his saddlebags loaded with what few personal items he owned. He was a soldier. Personal property was a luxury. I've been discharged, milady. I have to leave your service tonight. Celestia sighed. She knew this was coming. Oh Naruto, it was just not meant for you to be here. You belong elsewhere. I belong by your side. His hoof hit the tile and caused the room to shake. Immediately he was filled with shame and bowed his head. I'm sorry, your highness. It is unbecoming of me to lose my temper with you. I understand, Naruto. You look strange without your armor, you know. It will take some getting used to. His ears drooped further it seemed. Yes milady. Taking a deep breath, Celestia slowly approached her protege. With a gentle hoof, she raised his chin so he could meet her gaze. I know of what has been done. I know that those documents were forged. I know you are innocent. And the captains responsible will be punished. Rest assured. Blue eyes darted back and forth, searching for reason. Then why? Because you are meant to go and find your destiny elsewhere. Oh Naruto, many of us don't want you to go. The servants adore you. You're a very polite young gentlecolt. The townspeople feel safe when you walk the street beside me. They feel like they can approach me. One bodyguard of great strength is much more endearing than a squad of trained soldiers. She smiled gently at him and she was reminded once more of when he was little and held her gaze, unafraid of her power. Their power is unmatched here. Your agility, untouchable. Trust me when I say that this is not an end but a beginning. And you will be missed. By me. By the younger soldiers who look up to you. By the palace servants. By the people of Canterlot. But it's time for you to go and see the world. I've seen the world by your side. No, you've seen where I have taken you in this world. It's not the same. You must experience it for yourself. Find your place in the world. Get that cutie mark finally. Find a nice mare, for heaven's sake. Red seemed to flare upon his cheeks. Princess. Please. She covered her mouth daintily with her hoof and laughed, the sound soothing him somewhat. This was a side she showed few. A region can't appear too soft, after all. He gave her a sad smile, and his eyes had never seemed bigger. I was instructed to turn in all my effects. Including the headband you had made for me. Oh, Naruto. That's. No. I want to do this right. I want you to have it back. Keep it for me. Perhaps one day, my travels will bring me back here and I can accept it back then. The lump formed in her throat as she levitated the headband up and over his ears, the weight seeming to slow down time itself. This was it. She was losing not only a valued member of her court but a dear friend, nay, a family member. Naruto strode forward and wrapped his forelegs around her neck. Thank you, princess. For everything. I love you. And with that he walked away without looking back. Celestia sat there stunned into silence. He'd never said that. He'd never hugged her. As a foal, as a young colt, never. Not even in their most private moments where she could see it in his eyes. He was devoted to her and Equestria. For hours it seemed she sat there, staring out the window, long after his silhouette had vanished from her view, out past Canterlot. He didn't deserve what had happened, but she let it play out. He needed to leave, to experience the world. He needed this push. He couldn't do that if he was always dedicated to sacrificing everything just to protect her. It was that word again, sacrifice. Suddenly angry with the whole situation, she called for an attendant. Yes, your highness. Summon the captains of the guard. All three. I believe we will have something to discuss. I want them here within the hour. The loud explosion caught her attention and she saw a ring of rainbow in the sky. She'd never seen such a thing. And right after that, an enormous surge of magical power. The sudden crash outside caught her attention once more. A giant baby dragon had exploded through the research wing of her school for gifted unicorns. She flapped her wings and flew to the open window. Better make that in 2 hours. I have a feeling I might be a bit preoccupied for a while. She'd found her next student. It had been a few years since he left the palace. He hadn't even bothered to keep up with the time because knowing how long he'd been away would only depress him more. He was lost, without a purpose. He needed purpose. Needed to be needed. At least, that's what he thought. The life of a vagabond didn't suit him. He'd been all over Equestria it seemed. He'd seen the kingdom, but he still hadn't found a place where he belonged. For the past few weeks he'd been wandering through the everfree forest. He'd seen the ancient palace Celestia had told him about before, falling down around itself in disrepair, but out of respect, he stayed away from it. He sighed as he walked along. He had no bits left to his name. He hadn't actually worked anywhere in about a year. Nothing gave him the satisfaction that the physical labor of being a guard did. The training off duty. Speaking with the princess and learning from her. He missed his old life. Head down and staring at the ground as he plodded along, he hadn't really been paying attention to where he was going. His stomach gurgled hungrily and his lips curled in a frown. He was so hungry. He really should have taken that job back in Stalingrad as a bouncer. The bits would have at least got him some rations for this little excursion. Lost in thought, he plodded along. Look at him. A former lieutenant in the royal guard, the bodyguard of Celestia herself, reduced to that of a regular bum. He used to be somebody. Now he was out in the wilderness alone. A quick snort banished that line of thought. He had moped enough over the years. His walking came to a halt however when he ran headfirst into a tree and felt something besides bark smash on top of his skull. A quick rub down of his forehead to make sure nothing was hurt but his pride and he looked downward to find an apple. An apple. Quick as lightning he snapped a bite out of the gleaming red fruit and munched happily, his stomach tasting its first real drop of food in days. He looked up in the branches to see lots of apples, literally tons of them. Licking his lips in anticipation, he sat down at the trunk, lifted his front right hoof and tapped the tree. He didn't want to break it, just knock some apples loose. His stomach rumbled again and he pulled his hoof back and slammed it onto the bark. He was greeted by a shower of red. One last apple thumped him on the skull and he chuckled to himself. Whoops. Guess that was a bit too hard. The apples were delicious. He felt like he must have eaten half the pile. The rest he planned to shove in his saddlebags for the trip. They'd keep for a few days at least. And with his stomach full, he'd have time to meditate and reconnect with nature again. His energy had been low as of late. You gonna pay for those apples? Or am I gonna have to take it out of your hide? Naruto froze in place and slowly turned to see a large red stallion, a draft horse, wearing a large wooden yoke, staring at him with half-lidded eyes, a piece of wheat swishing around his lips. Naruto was by no means of the definition small here. Routinely was bigger than most guards. But this guy was by and large one of the largest ponies he'd ever met. The hoof went behind his head and he scratched at an invisible itch, trying to disarm the situation with his patented smile that usually got him out of trouble. "I apologize, sir. I wasn't aware that these apples were anyone's to own." The big green eyes of the red pony didn't flinch. His voice came out again, slow and measured. "They're on my farm. Sweet apple acres. And those apples belong to my family. It's how we make our living. Now you gonna pony up the bits for him? Or do I have to have you arrested?" Naruto's smile fell. "I'm sorry. I don't have any bits. But perhaps we could come to an arrangement of sorts. Could I work them off somehow? I didn't mean to steal, sir." The red pony rolled the weed around to the other side of his mouth. "Maybe. I saw what you did to that tree. Ain't many can buck apples with one hoof like that. I'm one of the few that can. But never seen any pony do it with a front hoof. Name's Big Macintosh. You come with me. We'll see what my sister says about this." A nod was his answer. "My name is Naruto, sir. Strange name for a strange feller, I suppose. And who in tarnation is this?" Big Macintosh rolled his eyes. He'd already explained the situation. Leave it to Applejack to need more than one time to get it. "I just told you who he was, sis. And what I caught him doing. And how he did it. And how we came to be here." "I know what you said, smartapants. It still doesn't explain who he is or where he came from or what he was doing in our orchard." Naruto stepped forward and bowed his head a bit the way he'd been taught. "My name is Naruto, Miss Applejack. I'm a wanderer and I only ate your apples because I was hungry. I can do some work to pay for them. I'm unfortunately out of bits." Applejack rubbed her chin with her hoof. "Worker, huh? She and Big Mac could certainly use a helping hand. Maybe. I wanna see you buck a tree first. Then we'll talk. Let me get some baskets for the apples. If you can actually knock some off, that is." Not 5 minutes later, Applejack had baskets set up under a fully loaded tree. She turned to Naruto and narrowed her eyes. "Alright, mister. Let's see some magic." Naruto nodded and walked past her, staring resolutely at the tree. If only he hadn't been caught eating those apples, he wouldn't be in this position. But he'd been taught to always do the honorable thing. He owed these ponies for the meal. And a little work never hurt anyone. He looked back at the apple family. An elderly green pony and a small yellow one with a large bow had come out to watch too. Great. Now he had an audience. "Just like I saw you do back there, Mr. Naruto." He nodded to Big Mac and sat down in front of the tree. Lifting one hoof, he sized up and gave a quick thrust. The apple family's jaws collectively hit the ground when apples showered down into the waiting baskets. Naruto stood and sauntered back over to the fore. Applejack seemed to finally get her mouth working again. "How? One hit. But you're hired." Taken aback, Naruto lifted one hoof before him defensively, surprised at her sudden invasion of his personal space with her last declaration. The grin on her face was practically predatory. Well, I'm flattered. I only wanted to work off what I owed for the apples I ate and have in my bags. I'm not sure I'm cut out for farm work." "The heck you ain't. You just knocked out an entire tree's worth of apples with one hit. Why, with you around, me and Mac can get more done. We can increase production. Increased production means increased profits. Please, Mr. Naruto. But will put you up. Free rent. Mac can help build you a room on the side of the house. Granny's a great cook. You'll have your meals with us. And with more money flowing in we can pay you a decent wage." Naruto looked helplessly back and forth from one family member to the other. Granny Smith chuckled and winked at him. "You better just say yes, young'un. Applejack don't take no for an answer. Besides, you said you was a wanderer. Ain't you tired of wandering around? Settle down in one place for a while and you might find what you're looking for. Or that special some pony you're looking for. Worse places to be than Ponyville, you know." "Babe." The little yellow one bounced in place, happy with the idea. "Sure thing, Mr. Naruto. I'm Applebloom. You like it here. It's great living on the farm. And Ponyville has lots to do. It's where I go to school." Naruto looked helplessly from one family member to the next. Applejack and Applebloom both had large smiles on their faces and their eyes were hopeful. Big Mac looked uninterested, but that was a lie. His eyes betrayed him. He wouldn't mind some help. And Granny Smith had fallen asleep. The yellow-maned pony sighed and looked at the sky. "Well, it wouldn't hurt I suppose. But I reserve the right to leave when I want if this isn't something I want to do. I'll work off what I ate otherwise and I'll leave." Applejack positively beamed. "Great. Come on in the house and we'll get you settled. Big Mac. Get his saddlebags and put them up somewhere. Applebloom, fetch some blankets. We'll make him a pallet in the living room for now till we get that room built. Granny Smith, wake up." Naruto sighed as he followed along behind the apples. At least, he wouldn't be sleeping outside tonight. And maybe, just maybe, this is what the princess was talking about when he left all those years ago. He couldn't help feeling a little lighter inside. These folks' energy and happiness was infectious. Chapter 2. Applejack woke the next morning earlier than usual, excited to get out and work. They had a new hired hoof. One who could probably work on par with Macintosh, and this made her nearly want to squeal. Almost. Kinda sorta not a chance. In any event, she was excited to show him what to do around the farm. And on the weekend, they'd start building that room. As she tramped down the stairs, she noticed she was the only one up. That was strange. Granny was the first one up, followed by Mac. Always. She figured she must have been more excited than she thought. The coffee pot began to perk and brew as she yawned and inhaled the thick scent. Her half-lidded eyes looked out the window, at the moon hanging low in the sky and the figure silhouetted against it. Naruto sat on his haunches, his forelegs bent and hooves touching together before his chest. This was how he'd been taught to meditate, to reconnect with the magic of nature around him by the princess. He could feel everything, it seemed. He could hear every beat of a moth's wings, slow and measured. He could feel the heartbeat of the sleeping squirrels in the tree above him. He could feel his strength returning, it seemed. Meditation brought him a sense of peace. A sense of calm. He hadn't had the time to meditate in quite a while. Meditation required a sense of safety. He hadn't had that in the Everfree forest. He hadn't felt comfortable enough to do it in any of the other places he had visited either. He felt that here. It was almost like being back home. His eyes opened slowly and he looked at the moon. Just a couple hours and the sun would be rising. He'd start his first day of work on the farm and, if he was honest with himself, he was a tad excited. He hadn't done any actual physical labor in a long time and it would be great to stretch his muscles. He'd decided last night that he would give this 6 months. If he liked it here, he'd stay. If not, he'd consider his debt repaid, collect what bits the family owed him, and continue on his journey. With a quick thrust forward, he was back on all 4 hooves and moseying back into the farmhouse. Applejack watched him lift his nose at the smell of the coffee and quietly shut the so as not to wake her family. She smiled as he wandered into the kitchen and took a quick sip of her coffee. He nodded to her once he rounded the doorframe and glanced at her cough cup. Cups are in the cupboard yonder. Are you a coffee drinker, Mr. Naruto? Not much. I drank it in the early morning hours when I needed to be awake back home. Now this was a line of inquiry she could get into. And where is back home? You never told us last night. Didn't tell us much of anything really. Naruto tipped the mug back in his teeth and slowly let the hot coffee dribble into his mouth. Yep, that was good stuff. A soft sigh escaped as he sat the mug back on the table. I'd rather keep my past in the past, ma'am. No offense to you or your family, but I'm a private pony and my past has both good and bad memories. If I decide to stay on as a worker, I'll tell you everything you want to know, but it's for the best right now that you don't get too attached to me. Applejack ground her teeth a bit but accepted the answer. Then a thought hit her. You know, little Applebloom took a shine to you fairly quickly. Children often do when something catches their attention. Applejack's voice sounded very smug. She'll get a story or two out of you for sure. I ain't met anyone yet that can say no to those big ol' eyes of hers. And if she hears it, I'll hear it. I've spent time around the young ones before, you know. I'm quite sure I can deflect any questions of hers. We'll see. On to business. When Big Mac gets up, we'll get started. You ready? Naruto rolled his shoulders and grinned. As I'll ever be. Celestia was just raising the sun as the Apple siblings and Naruto walked to the equipment shed. Macintosh elected to let his sister do the talking. Now there ain't much to do this time of year except harvest the apples. It's pretty much what we do every season except for winter. There's always some kind of different apple that grows during some time of the year. What with you being here though, I wanted to try something a little different. See, last year I bought some seeds of a few different vegetables and I wanted to try growing our own plot. Kinda ease up on the grocery bill a bit, you know. Naruto nodded. So, I figured, you know how to buck apples, obviously. But me and Mac can handle that this morning until I go to set up a stand in town. I want you to plow that field over yonder. Blue Eyes regarded a rocky, unbroken field. His eyebrow cocked and he looked at the sheepishly grinning Applejack. I know it ain't exactly fair to ask on your first day, but it would be a big help. And don't think I expect you to get it all done the first day. It's a big field. And it's only you. And you've obviously never farmed before. I'll handle it, Miss Applejack. Just help me get everything set up. I've never pulled a plow before, but I'm sure I can handle it. Applejack positively beamed at him as Mac pulled the plow out. Naruto's hope sank as he looked at the dilapidated thing and her face fell, somewhat ashamed. Yeah, I know it ain't pretty. But it's all we got until we can afford a new one. Mac has a tough time with it, so I understand if you do too. The plow was rusty and dull along the blade. The harness was old and worn. Clearly, he would have to fix this first. Miss Applejack, I simply can't work with this blade as dull as it is. Do you have a sharpening stone? Applejack glanced back to the corner and nodded to Mac, who ambled off. Well, yeah, but neither me or Mac are good at sharpening things. We just tend to make them more dull. We'd usually take it into the blacksmith in Canterlot to get worked on, but last year's crop was kinda smaller than usual so. Mac nudged the grinding wheel into the light with a grunt and stepped around it. Are you any good with this kinda stuff, Mr. Naruto? Naruto nodded and began the task of unhooking the plow blade from the frame. I've sharpened a few blades in my life. Part of my training in the pal past. Well, that'd been rather lame, he thought. Thankfully, neither one pressed him on the point and Applejack just nodded. Well, if you can sharpen it, I'd be mighty grateful. It ain't part of your agreed upon duties, but it would help us quite a bit. And it would make your job easier as well. Say, I got a question. How old are you? I'm around Big Macintosh's age, I suppose. Mid-20s. You don't know. Naruto shrugged and lifted the blade up to the stone. It was never important where I was before. All that mattered was doing the job. Well, that's what I thought anyway. In any event, I'd better get started, Miss Applejack. Sooner I start, the sooner I finish. Yeah. Alright. Well, I'll be in town later, so if you have any questions, just get Big Macintosh. He'll help you hitch up to the harness and get you started. Naruto nodded and began to pump the wheel, setting the stone turning and dropping the blade to the stone. Yes ma'am. Applejack returned home with Applebloom at almost sunset. She'd sold every apple at her stand and she was feeling good. Mac was sitting on the porch when they arrived and Applebloom ran to him and jumped up, giving him a hug. Hey Big Macintosh. Big Mac returned her hug with a massive foreleg. The evening, Sugar Cube. Y'all have fun at school? Yeah. Well, go on in and wash up for supper. Me and AJ will be in shortly. After a hearty okay from the diminutive little filly, Mac turned to his sister, his eyes still half-lidded, but she could tell he had something to say. So, how'd Naruto's first day of work go? Macintosh sighed and looked up at the ceiling of the porch. There was a hole in a corner. Best to get that fixed before wasps decided to make a nest. But back to the matter at hand. He's a beast when it comes to work, AJ. He's pure muscle, like me. He had those blades sharpened and he started on the field by mid-morning. You told him to move the rocks right. Before he slammed into one with the plow. Yep. AJ, I don't know what to think of that. He piled them up to a side of the field. The smaller ones that is. The big ones he either smashed into smaller ones or tossed aside. Said we can always use rocks for something later. I can't even do that, AJ. I'm strong and I can buck a tree with the best, but he was smashing rocks with his bare hooves. Well, supposedly Pinkie Pie comes from a family of miners and rock farmers. There's gotta be tricks. It weren't tricks. It was brute strength. AJ, he moved all those rocks and still got a quarter of that field plowed. Sis, I ain't too smart, but we've got a gem here if ever there was one. He's a solid worker. And I bet by the time this season is up, we'll have gotten more accomplished than we ever have. It ain't like you to praise some pony after knowing them for so little time, Macintosh. I know. That's why we need to tread careful here. There's more to him than meets the eye, sis. A lot more. I reckon so. Where is he? He's putting the plow up in the shed. Said he'd finish up tomorrow. Applejack nodded and headed on inside the house. Naruto let out a deep breath and stretched his back. No wonder Big Mac was strong enough to buck apples off a tree with one kick. Plowing took a lot of strength. Luckily, he had it in spades. It didn't compare to the thrill of combat though. Training to defend the princess, he missed that. But that life was behind him now. He had to find a new lot in life. Being a farmhand wasn't so bad. It was honest work at least. And no less monotonous than guard duty. The apples so far had been nice folk. It was also nice to sleep inside for a change, without waking up with dew on his back. And Granny Smith was a pretty good cook. She'd regaled him with tales of her youth the night before, while the rest of the apples sat by and smiled and rolled their eyes. He had sat there, ever the perfect gentlecolt, and listened to every word. But for now, he wanted some food and sleep. His hoofsteps echoed as he stepped onto the porch and turned the knob with his mouth. He heard the little clops of Applebloom as she ran up to greet him, a huge grin on her face. Hiya, Mr. Naruto. Did ya have fun today? He smiled down at her. I wouldn't say fun per se, but I feel good, better than I have in a long time. That's what my brother says all the time. You two sure sound alike. The laugh rang out from him. I doubt that, little lady. Your brother has a drawl I can't match. Yeah, I noticed that too. You sound like one of them highfalutin people from Canterlot. Naruto's ears slightly drooped, but he kept a smile on. No reason to worry the little thing. Yeah. I get that a lot. He walked past her calmly toward the bathroom, intent on cleaning up before supper. Applebloom padded along behind him, suddenly intent on something. He heard her gasp. You don't have a cutie mark. But you're as old as Big Mac. Naruto looked at his flank, unadorned and the same color as the rest of his body. I just haven't found what I'm good at yet. Part of the reason I'm a wanderer, I suppose. Applebloom's head was spinning. An adult who didn't have a cutie mark? Unheard of. And it made her sad. It was usually something a pony discovered early on in life. Some got it sooner, some got it later, but every pony eventually got one. Don't worry about it, Applebloom. I stopped worrying about it a long time ago. When it happens, it'll happen. His smile seemed to melt away any of her apprehension, and her bounciness returned. Maybe it'll be an apple like the rest of my family. You're real good at working on the farm. Least that's what Big Mac says. I'm flattered your brother thinks so. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to wash up. Applebloom bounced away and into the kitchen and he continued up the stairs, uninterrupted. So, how was your first day, Mr. Naruto? Naruto stopped chewing on his stalk of celery and swallowed. Pretty good, ma'am. I got those blades sharpened and all the rocks moved out like you asked. I was able to get about a quarter of the field plowed before evening. I haven't worked that hard in a long time. It felt real good. I'm glad to hear that. Big Mac says you're a hard worker and he's a good judge of character. I apologize for your sleeping arrangement at the moment. We'll get on that room this weekend and get it built for you. It's nothing major, Miss Applejack. I don't mind. Being inside is enough at the moment. Ugh. Call me Applejack. Drop the miss stuff. Makes me feel old. I can't do that, ma'am. It's how I was raised. You're my boss. It's just respect. Fine. Be like that. Applejack dove back into her meal with aplomb, not bothering with any more conversation. Granny Smith cackled from her end of the table and grinned at Naruto. She don't like not having the final say, son. Remember that. That would be a good thing to remember, yes. Especially since she was the boss. He had a vague sense of deja vu. Seems like at one point he was always in trouble for disrespect. Now he was in trouble for respecting someone. Life was so confusing sometimes. 1 year later. Applejack sighed contentedly. The work was done for the day, no, for the season. They'd had a record year so far. Profits were up, way up. They'd never been more productive. And it was all thanks to their new farmhand. Naruto was a godsend. He could keep up with Mac without stress. Plow what needed plowing. Fix almost everything or at the least hold whatever Macintosh needed him to. He wasn't much of a carpenter. At the last winter wrap-up, he'd outdone every pony except Mac at dozing the snow, keeping pace with his coworker. Nah, coworker was uncalled for. Mac and Naruto were practically best friends. Hell, he was practically family at this point. Applejack took a drink of water out of a rain barrel and smacked her lips. They'd built him that room the first weekend and he'd been ever so grateful. It was still Spartan, hardly anything in it. Just a few mementos from his past. Some medals, she guessed from contests he'd won. A couple of books, odd ones from the covers and titles. And a strange necklace that he never wore, hung on a hook above his bed, a simple rope necklace with a tiny green emerald. He said he'd had it commissioned once when he was in Canterlot after he'd seen it in a dream. He'd taken to farm work like a duck to water. He'd taken to her family even more. Applebloom adored him and he'd taken to correcting her manners at the table and her grammar when she misspoke. AJ chuckled at that thought. Applebloom didn't like it when he did that, but she liked to impress the older stallion. Her reward for good behavior was a gallop across the farm on his back at full speed, and he was fast. Faster than her, and she was the fastest earth pony in town. Or he told her a story of his wanderings. Always good for a laugh. He never even left the farm. Said that he had no need to go into town. If he ever needed anything, he'd give her or Mac a list and ask that it be taken out of his wages. Not much of a list ever. Just 1 or 2 things. It was a shame, but she didn't press him on it. It was just sad to see a pony less sociable than Macintosh. At least he went into town sometimes. At the 6-month mark, he'd come to the family at supper one evening and said that if they'd have him, he would stay. Their answer was given when Applebloom tackled him with a hug. Of course they wanted him. He'd become a great friend to the family and a hell of a worker. And he'd told them some of his life. Not all, Applejack presumed, because it was pretty brief. He was a soldier back at the palace. Raised in the military all his life. Youngest earth pony to ever join up. But a few years before Big Mac found him stealing apples, he left the military and began to wander. That story was too simple, she suspected, although he loved to tell Applebloom tales of his travels and the ponies he'd met. She had to admit, it was a great way to pass the time in the evening and way better than one of Granny Smith's "Why Back in My Day" stories. He cooked for them sometimes when Granny was down. Said he'd learned from the chefs in the palace on a whim. Took care of Applebloom when she was sick. Said he'd learned a bit of medicine from the palace physician. He was a mystery, wrapped in a conundrum, boxed inside of more mystery. She'd never been good at fact-fassy big words. Probably wasn't the right word anyway. She looked out to the field again to see Naruto dragging the plow back to the barn. Not the hard way, like Mac had always done. He'd outfitted it with foldable wheels for the journey back to the barn. It only adds about 100 pounds to the weight when you're pulling, Miss Applejack. I don't even feel it. What about Mac? You think he's gonna admit he can't do something I can do? He's stubborn as a mule. All of you are. Too much pride at times. Although that's not always a bad thing. That was a good memory. Mac had never complained out loud, but she was pretty sure he didn't appreciate the extra weight. He did like the wheels at the end of the day though. And the consistently sharpened blades. As she sauntered back to the house, her mind turned to their newest business venture. Something Naruto called root beer. She'd come home to find him brewing something in the still out back that they used for cider. Horrified that he was making alcohol, she had confronted him and found he was making something similar to their cider, only from sassafras roots he found in the everfree forest. Her first taste of the completed brew was heavenly. She'd started bringing a barrel with her once a week to the stand. The profits from it stood next to the apple sales all on their own. Ponies in town loved it. Oh, their cider was still the real moneymaker, but now they could sell a beverage and not sacrifice apples. It was hard to believe it had been a year and none of her friends had even met him yet. Even when they came by to visit, he was always out in the field. She swore he was worse than Big Macintosh. Fluttershy and Rainbow Dash had seen him when they had flown over, but one was too shy to approach and one was too busy and embroiled in her tricks. Rarity never came to the farm. And Pinkie Pie was, well, she was Pinkie Pie. But that was all about to change. The summer sun celebration was around the corner and she was shutting the farm down for it. He was going into town with her and the family whether he liked it or not. It wasn't good to be a social recluse, especially someone as friendly as Naruto. Mind made up, she wiped her mouth with a hoof and rang the dinner bell. Summer sun celebration is in a month. All the ponies at the table looked at Applejack, her trademark hat no longer on her head, since Naruto had mentioned it was bad manners to wear it at the table, whether it was a colt or filly wearing it, and Big Mac nodded. Yep. Well, I was thinking. This year Ponyville has been elected to host the celebration, and the princess herself will be in attendance. We'll have a whole lot of the family here to help with the preparations, so I thought once all the chores were done we could go as a family. That includes you, Naruto. But. Applejack leveled him with a glare, pinning him in his seat. No buts. You haven't left this place in over a year. I know that Sweet Apple Acres is a big place and you do get out of the house, but you haven't even gone into town yet. The princess herself is coming this year, so you're getting out and making some friends. It'll be good for you. I promise. Naruto looked helplessly around the table. Sure he didn't go into town, but he had no need to. And with the princess coming he really didn't want to go. He didn't want her to see how far he'd fallen. His resolve crumbled when he locked eyes with a teary-eyed Applebloom. She didn't even need to say please, he just gave in and consented. Her little cries of triumph and Applejack's smug grin weren't helping though. He hadn't known that the Apple family was that extensive. It seemed that the farm was overrun with ponies of all colors. He hadn't felt this overwhelmed since he left the royal palace. Everyone wanted to shake his hoof, welcome him to the farm, wish him well. He upheld his bearings and took it all in stride. Welcoming each hoofshake, returning every greeting and always maintaining eye contact. He was amused that little Applebloom was following his letter, trying to at least. She was still a little shy when some of the older mares got their hooves on her. Everything was going great. The pies and apple-related confectionaries for the celebration were coming along nicely. Then he heard AJ shout. Soup's on, every pony. Well, that was odd. Everyone had agreed to hold off on eating until the celebration was underway. Why in the world would she holler now? That's when he noticed the unicorn and the baby dragon with her. She seemed official, perhaps she was an emissary from the palace, down to check the preparations. He could swear he'd seen her before. Or perhaps a relative. He wasn't sure. She seemed quite unsettled though, with all the attention and food suddenly thrust upon her. Their eyes locked for a moment when Applejack introduced him as their farmhand, and for just a second, something clicked in her mind it seemed. It was gone just as quickly though, and she was off with a full belly to inspect something else. AJ threw her head back and laughed hard. "We doggies." That was a hoot. Did you see her face? She's a laugh riot. Stamping her hooves to get the attention of her family, she spoke loud and proud, the only way she knew how. "Alright, every pony. Let's get everything together and ready to go. We've still got to set up in Ponyville." A round of cheers was her answer and everyone scurried to their respective posts. Ooh. Everything looked so beautiful. Applebloom was glancing all around as she sat on Naruto's back, her tiny hooves resting on top of his head for a look at the scenery. He'd worn his necklace on impulse. The apples all said it looked nice on him, but he really only did it because he felt compelled to. As if it would matter. He smiled up at Applebloom and nodded once, deciding to mimic Big Mac. Babe. Yeah, little sis. Rarity outdid herself this year. The princess being in attendance must have really got her pumped. I bet she started on all this like a week ago. Naruto kept silent and just kept walking. He sincerely hoped that the princess wouldn't see him, and yet, at the same time, he hoped she would. It would be nice to see her again, however briefly. Perhaps he was overthinking things again. It seemed to be a bad habit lately. Applebloom seemed to pick up on his mood and thumped him on the head. Sis says I ain't supposed to let you act like that tonight. And I'm also supposed to help you find some friends. So I got an idea. Well, Mac and Sis catch up with other ponies, let's go meet some people I know. Naruto looked up at his rider and blinked his big blue eyes. Well, how about we just walk around and you show me where everything is first. I've never been to Ponyville before and I have no idea where we're going. That seemed to brighten her up. She gave him a chipper okay, and off they went. She showed him the school, the library, all the various shops around the square. The park, the market where Applejack set up her apple stand, and then finally they came to Townel, where everyone was gathering. Applebloom hopped off his back to find her school friends, and Naruto wandered off to find either Mac or Applejack. He looked up to where Yellow Pegasus with a pink mane was conducting a bird choir, engrossed in her work. It sounded lovely. He saw AJ at a refreshment stand, talking with a blue Pegasus with a rainbow mane, and wandered over when she waved. He couldn't hear what she was saying, but she was pointing animatedly in his direction, and the unnamed blue filly was looking at him with wide magenta eyes. And this is Naruto. Naruto, this is my friend Rainbow Dash, the fastest pony in Ponyville. She's also part of the weather management team in charge of the clouds and rainfall. Naruto nodded and smiled. Nice to meet you, Miss Dash. Rainbow Dash pooched out her bottom lip and stepped a bit closer. He doesn't sound like a cool person. He sounds kinda snooty, like Rarity. Dash. He's my farmhand and friend. Be nice. Naruto had started to say something else when the birds rang out the tune for the princess's arrival, and all attention turned to the mare. She gave a small speech welcoming the princess, and a white unicorn with a royal purple mane pulled back the curtain revealing nothing. Now he was worried. The princess was never late to anything. The unicorn ran into the room that she was supposed to be sequestered in and ran back out with a gasp. She's gone. Panic started to set in amongst all the ponies present, and the mayor struggled to keep her cool and maintain what little order she could. He could hear a pink pony yelling about hide and seek and babbling to the purple unicorn he'd seen earlier. He was about to slink off and see what had happened himself when a purple haze began to form on the balcony. Murmurs soon turned to outright screams when the haze split apart and a large black mare, an alicorn, appeared, her head held high and a sneer on her face. Naruto froze when he saw the horn and wings. He'd only seen them on one other. And the flowing mane made of starlight was a dead giveaway. Hello, my loyal subjects. It's been so long since I've seen your precious little sun-loving faces. Rainbow Dash piped up beside him. What did you do to our princess? The mare on the balcony merely laughed, and Applejack had to grab Dash by the tail to keep her from flying up to confront their tormentor. Why? Am I not royal enough for you? Has my name been forgotten in my exile? Ooh, oh, I know. Queen Meanie. No, Black Snooty. Blah. Applejack was quick enough to shove a cupcake in the pink one's mouth, shutting her up. The pink pony moved to speak again, and Naruto clapped a hoof over her mouth while Applejack hissed at her through a mouth of rainbow-colored tail. Pinkie Pie, shut up. At least he had a name now. He had barely listened to what else the nightmarish mare had said to taunt the ponies nearest her, but snapped to when the purple unicorn, Twilight Sparkle, he remembered from her visit to the farm, declared that she was the mare in the moon, Nightmare Moon. Well, prairie shit. That's gonna make this more difficult if she's Princess Celestia's sister. I'm glad to see that some pony remembers me. Now, you little sun lovers, I will cast my shade over this world and the night will rule eternal. The mayor finally snapped out of her stupor and ordered the royal guards to attack the black alicorn. They tried valiantly, but were knocked aside by a swipe of her ever-flowing tail and mane. She cackled evilly as lightning crashed around her and seemed to dissipate into the air, like a mist, and out a window. Everyone stood still, not knowing what to do, as the guards struggled back to their feet. Applejack let go of Rainbow Dash's tail, and Naruto released Pinkie Pie's mouth. Rainbow Dash immediately barreled outside. That snapped his mind out of the fog. It was time for action. Everyone was in disarray, the guards seemingly didn't know what to do. It was time for him to step forward again. A quick look and he found little Applebloom cowering with her friends. That was in it to spur him into action. And yawn. Everyone froze in place, even Twilight Sparkle, who had been on her way out to try to discover a way to stop Nightmare Moon. The royal guards all snapped to attention, their backs straight as Naruto walked forward. His voice rang of authority and one soldier, a sergeant by the shield on his armor, seemed to recognize him and even seemed relieved. "Lieutenant. Lieutenant Naruto, it is you. Fall in, soldiers. Officer on deck." Everyone stood slack-jawed as Naruto stood before the assembled guard, his head held high. "Alright, listen up. I want a detail of guards to patrol the perimeter of the town. No one gets in, no one gets out. A detail of no more than 5 and no less than 3 to scour the area for clues to Princess Celestia's whereabouts. You." Twilight Sparkle jumped, nearly dislodging her small dragon pet Spike, that was his name. She meekly turned to face him. "As the only one who knew who Nightmare Moon was, you know the most about her. Get to the library and research where she might have gone as fast as you can." He ignored the indignant grumble that Twilight gave him and turned back to Applejack, only to find her and her friend sprinting after Twilight Sparkle. Well, he'd catch up to them quickly enough. The guards were still stock still, awaiting orders. He stared at the one who had recognized him. You're in charge till I return. Keep the townsfolk safe and keep things orderly. Do not let anything else happen." The sergeant snapped a salute. "Yes sir, Lieutenant. It's an honor to serve under you again sir." Naruto nodded and made for the door. He had to catch up to the fillies before they did something rash. Dismissed. Chapter 3. Damn it, damn it, damn it. How could they have gotten so far ahead of me? I was only a few minutes behind them. Naruto used every bit of his training to track the 6 mares down. He couldn't believe he'd forgotten where the library was already. Then it clicked. East side of town. His teeth ground together as he ran. He couldn't let them do this alone. They couldn't stand up to the kind of power that Nightmare Moon exuded. He didn't know if he could either, but he knew for certain they couldn't. He'd slammed the door of the library open with his shoulder and rushed inside, thankful that Applebloom had shown him where it was earlier in the day. The candles were still lit and books were scattered everywhere. Naruto was near panicking. This wasn't good, not good at all. If anything happened to Applejack, Big Macintosh would have his hide. Especially because of his little show of authority back there. That was another thing. Now they'd all want an explanation of his past affiliation with the Royal Guard. But that would have to wait. Which book had that studious unicorn used to find where to go? Gods, she'd left books everywhere. Piles of them. He glanced furiously around, but nothing stood out. He heard a snore upstairs. Of course. Her little dragon assistant would know. He pounded up the stairs to find the little creature tucked away in a basket. Normally, he wouldn't be so rude, but time was of the essence. He ripped the blanket away, spinning the tiny dragon out of his bedding, where he hit the floor with an ouch. "Get up. Wake up. I need to know where those ponies went." Spike rubbed his eyes blearily as he tried to wake up. Dragons slept harder than other creatures. He recognized that voice though. Hey. You're the pony at the party that took command of the situation. That was pretty cool, dude." Yes. Cool, whatever. I need to know where your owner went." Spike glared at him, his head fins standing up straighter. "She's my boss, not my owner, buddy. And I don't know where they went. I remember her mentioning something about the elements of harmony. I passed out after that. Sorry, big guy." Naruto slammed a hoof onto the floor, making the whole tree shake and startling Spike, who looked up at him with wide eyes and more than a little fear. "Then help me find something. Anything. I have to find them before they either catch up to Nightmare Moon or she catches up to them." Spike hurriedly hopped down the stairs. Alright, sheesh. Rude much? Manners are a luxury I can't afford at the moment. Now help me look. You know, you sound like Rarity right now. So I've heard. When I meet her, I'll be sure to compliment her on her impeccable manners and attitude. Until then, look. Spike immediately dove into a stack of books and began to search titles. Naruto did the same. Hexes and curses. No. Science of friendship. No. Rotation of crops, better set that aside for AJ and Mac for later. Lifestyles of the not so rich and famous. No. Hey, Mr. Naruto. What? Did you look at the bookshelf to see if it's there? Naruto sighed and wandered over to a random bookshelf. Now why would it be here? She looked at it obviously and every other book is strewn about, so why in Celestia's name would? Here it is. Elements of Harmony. A guide. Where'd you find that? Spike looked nonplussed as he flipped through the book and shrugged. Under the E section. When Twilight's in a rush, she usually puts the book she's looking at back on the shelf. Not so much when she's doing her usual research. Now let's see. Ah, here it is. Last known location of the elements was in the ancient castle in the Everfree Forest. But that's. He heard the sound of a crash and looked to see that Naruto had flown through the door, off towards the Everfree Forest. He sighed and flopped down against a pile of books. Well, this is certainly a mess. Of course, he thought to himself as he ran, whatever you're looking for is always in the spookiest, nastiest place on the planet. Of course a treasure as valuable as the elements of harmony were in a dilapidated old castle, about to fall down around itself. Of course it was in the middle of an incredibly dangerous and hard to get through forest. Murphy's Law, Naruto, Murphy's Law. Whatever can happen, will happen. If he ever met Murphy, he'd kill him, just to show him the irony of that little law. He was making ground now though. Having slummed his way through the forest once, he knew that the most direct way was to go straight through. It was strange though. He felt as if the closer he got to the castle, the more right he felt. Surely that wasn't his destiny. Running toward a rundown castle. He hoped not. He was halfway through the forest when a roar nearly knocked him on his butt. He slammed to a stop and spread his legs, ready to fight. If it was a manticore, it wouldn't be a long fight. He'd just kill the beast and be on his way. What stepped out of a nearby cave made his heart sink. It was an Ursa Minor. A celestial bear. A cub, to be precise. And where a cub was, his mother wasn't far behind. He didn't have time for this. The miner took a swing at him and he dodged, letting it take out a couple trees instead. It wouldn't be long before Mama Bear heard the commotion and made her way over. He really didn't have time for this. The Ursa Minor chased him a ways as he tried to find a way around it, but it was no good. It was almost like something was controlling it. That's when he saw the purple mist around its head. Of course. Nightmare Moon. The forest was her domain, the area she used to rule from. Of course she'd know the lay of the land. He didn't want to hurt the cub. That was a sure way to get its mother angry and willing to fight. But he wasn't making it past without doing something. Could he put it to sleep somehow? No, not without knocking it out. This was going to be hard. He was almost resigned to fighting a cub when an earth-shattering roar echoed throughout the forest and Mama Bear, and Ursa Major, emerged from the cave. Aw prairie shit. Man, he'd been swearing a lot lately. Celestia would be most displeased with him. The purple mist around the cub's head seemed to dissipate, no longer needing to be there now that the mother bear had awoken. Naruto grimaced as the cub ran past its mother and back into the cave. No avoiding a confrontation now. He was almost flattered that Nightmare Moon thought him a big enough distraction to try to keep him away. The Ursa Major lifted a huge paw and slammed the ground in front of him before roaring again. Intimidation tactics, huh? Seems it didn't want to fight either, but that was only because of the cub. If it fought, it could get hurt. If it was hurt, it couldn't protect the cub. Basic Wildlife 101. Always offer the bluff first. But right now, time was of the essence. A fight would severely drain him, and he needed every ounce of strength when he made it to the castle. So he squared his shoulders and stomped each hoof so hard they left an imprint in the ground. He practically reeked of power as he looked up into the towering eyes of the bear, his furious glare matching her own. Get out of my way. The Ursa Major was slightly taken aback by the tiny creature's attempt at intimidation. Even through all of its growling, the words had carried to its ears. Surely it didn't think it had a chance. But as it stood at its full height, looking down at the rust-orange pony, it saw something. An aura, if it could be described as such. And it didn't like the feeling. The little pony that stood before it looked ready to destroy the bear. And it didn't need that. It had a cub to take care of. Slowly, coming down onto all fours and backing away, it continued to growl and circle back to the cave, always keeping Naruto in her sights. Naruto, in turn, circled her as well, ready to bolt at a moment's notice. When he was certain she wasn't coming after him again, he galloped into the bushes and back towards the castle, leaving behind a shaking and frightened pair of celestial bears. He let out a shuddering breath. He was never doing that again if he could avoid it. Sure, he could have probably beaten the beast, but he'd have been severely hurt. Some things just weren't worth it. The scream split the air and he flew into a full-on run. He might be too late. Faster and faster he ran, his face settling into a war-torn grimace the closer he got. He hadn't realized how much strength he was putting into his gallop. The girls had finally found the elements of harmony, but there were only 5. Twilight desperately tried to figure out what was the matter, to find the spark she had read about that activated them. But just when she had made her move, Nightmare Moon appeared and teleported both them and the elements to another tower, away from her new friends. The mare in the moon used self-satisfaction. With the elements in her possession, never again would she be exiled, sealed away. Twilight looked on, dumbfounded as the bringer of eternal night shattered their only hope of defeating her into tiny pieces. Literally. The others appeared just in time to see their hopes go up in smoke as the alicorn cackled maniacally. She used her magic to toss them all about, slamming them into the floor. Twilight merely stared at the broken pieces of the elements from her prone position and shut her eyes, blocking out all sound and sight, trying with all her might to find the spark. They all felt the rumbles, small at first, and building. Even Nightmare Moon had stopped laughing, looking around for the cause. Was the castle collapsing? For a second it stopped and she turned to gloat to the 6 little ponies in front of her one last time. She never got to start. A rust-orange blur slammed through the stone wall and into her, barreling the both of them through the adjacent wall and outside. As they fell, she looked into the eyes of her attacker. They were blue, endlessly blue and filled with rage. His mouth was set in a sneer. They landed hard, her shock having prevented her from teleporting away. The dust was cleared immediately with a flap of her wings and she settled into a ready stance. She was not a fighter. She preferred magic and trickery, but her opponent was obviously battle-ready and wary. He was already to his hooves again, ready for her. I promised Princess Celestia that I would protect this land. Her kingdom. I won't let you throw away all her work, sister or not. Nightmare Moon turned her head slightly, looking at him with one eye. You know of my royal blood and still attack me? Why not serve me? His hoof struck the ground and cracked it, the fissure snaking all the way to her hoof. I promised the princess on the day I joined the royal guard that I would serve the true rulers of Equestria. You are neither of them. And there's one thing I do not do, Nightmare Moon. His lips curled back into a contemptuous smirk and he leaned back, ready to spring forward. I never break a promise. They both lunged forward. Applejack heaved herself to her feet and grunted. That had hurt. Badly. She remembered Nightmare Moon slamming them all to the floor, the destroying of the elements, and then something had burst through the wall and tackled the mare and the moon outside, away from them. Realization struck her hard enough to shift the hat on her head. Naruto. She looked left and right for him, but found only ponies trying to recuperate and Twilight Sparkle nearly in tears, laying before the ruined pieces of harmony, whispering to herself. AJ. She turned to find Rainbow Dash and the others staring out the window. You might want to come see this. Your farmhand is going head to head with Nightmare Moon. As she galloped to the window and shoved her way to the glass, she could only think that Rainbow Dash always did have a way with words. Naruto snarled as he dodged another piece of her mane that threatened to decapitate him. This fight wasn't to his advantage. Her magic was simply too strong to ignore. She tried to fly away and back to the tower, but he'd leaped up and wrapped his legs around her torso, driving her back into the ground. That had surprised her. She'd obviously never encountered an earth pony with such a prodigious leap before. She tried to engage him in physical combat, but after the first few dozen swipes of his hooves nearly took her head off, she had reverted to magic and found it suited better to dealing with him. Fine, if that's what she wanted, he'd just get in close. He couldn't afford to lose here. His oath to the princess was on the line. And the lives of his employer and her friends as well. He had come to enjoy his time with the Apple family. They'd accepted him when they didn't have to, and he wouldn't see their dreams shattered because of one mare's selfishness, even if that mare was of royal blood. He'd sworn to Celestia to protect her sister Luna, not Nightmare Moon. He'd kill her if he had to. Her flowing tail thrusted him and he ran inside her guard, spearing her through yet another wall and driving her into the cold tile. She lay beneath him, her head twisting this way and that as he pounded his hooves into her face relentlessly, like jackhammers. She'd never been hurt before. And this hurt. It hurt so bad. She feared that her skull would break. No one had ever dared to hit her. And this lowly earth pony, a being of no magic, of no regal bearing, decided to strike her. To lay peasant hooves on her. She threw Naruto off of her in an explosion of power, a cut above her eyes bleeding profusely. She touched a hoof gently to it and stared. It was red. She began to tremble with fury. No one has ever drawn my blood before. Consider yourself a fine warrior. To make a goddess bleed is unthinkable. I will keep your memory forever. You would have made a fine servant. Naruto's tail swished back and forth angrily. I make a lousy slave though. And he was on her again as quickly as he could, kicking, biting, headbutting. He couldn't even tell if he was hurting her. But he had to be. She was being pressed back, bit by bit. But he didn't know if it would be enough. Now, he just wanted to buy the girls enough time to run. He wouldn't be making it out of this alive. Of that he was sure. He overextended one of his mule kicks and felt her tail envelop him. He was caught. She brought him near her face and sneered. You. I'm going to make an example of you. Her eerie calm did not bode well for him. He didn't even register as they broke through the floor of the tower, the 5 mares at the window screaming in terror. Nightmare Moon laughed as she held him aloft for them to see. Look, ye mortals. This one dared to strike a princess, a goddess. To draw her blood. Now, I shall draw his and use it to paint the walls of my palace. I'll use his broken body as a message. This is what happens to those who deny my birthright. The mares looked on in horror as she slammed Naruto into every surface she could. She battered him along the wall, the floor, the ceiling. Naruto's vision was a blur. He vaguely noticed where they were. A throne room. They were in the tower with the throne room. His head lolled. Everything was a throb of blood and pain. He wasn't going to live through this. It was ironic really. Royalty took him in, royalty was taking him out. His eyes began to slowly close, but he felt something powerful then. It felt like the magic that Celestia used at times. He could hear voices arguing and the suddenly self-assured voice of Twilight declaring that she and the other girls were the spirits of harmony. His eyes trained on the sparkling pieces of the element circling the 6 ponies. Maybe they had done it, he thought. A vortex of color enveloped the 6 and shot toward Nightmare Moon, who screamed in fear. Her moonlight mane retracted and he felt himself falling. He didn't even feel himself hit the stone floor with a heavy thud in the shadows of a column. He struggled to straighten his hind legs but found they wouldn't work. Probably broken. With shuddering breaths, he was able to lock his forelegs in place long enough to lean against a wall. He noticed that the wall felt wet. That was probably his blood. His breaths were shallow and ragged and his body felt heavy as he used the wall for support. Well, at least he'd kept her at bay long enough for them to stop her. If only he'd fought harder, hit her harder, not been so worried about the girls and collateral damage. But they weren't fighters. That was his job. He protected them. His eyes closed and his body slumped against the wall, still upright. His necklace began to glow with a dull light. Applejack smiled at the scene before her. Celestia, released from her bonds, had reunited with her sister Luna and all was right with the world. They'd won the battle, defeated Nightmare Moon, and realized their potential as the spirits of harmony. Why, she even had a personal element to prove it. A cute little apple brooch. But a little bit of doubt grew in the back of her mind. Not all was right. And it clicked. They'd been so engrossed with what had transpired with the princesses, they'd forgotten about Naruto. Frantically, she looked around and found him leaning against a wall. A sigh of relief escaped her lips. At least he was trying to get up. That meant he was alive. He needed medical attention immediately though. She trotted over to help him, but the closer she got the more her smile faded. There was blood everywhere. Cuts and bruises all over his body. It scared her. She'd never seen a pony this broken and battered. She stopped just short of him. Naruto. Naruto, wake up. It's okay now. We won. Silence greeted her. Her heart sank further and the others started to take notice. She took another step forward, her ears pinning to the side of her head. Naruto, this isn't funny. This isn't a joke like you usually play on me and Big Mac and Applebloom. Wake up. Now. The other girls and the 2 princesses had come up behind her now. Applejack didn't notice. She was focused on Naruto. She leaned in and pushed his shoulder. He didn't move. He felt clammy. Her lips were quivering with fear now. Naruto. Naruto, please wake up. She sat on her haunches in front of him and her head hung low. Fluttershy wrapped her in a hug when she began to sniffle. It ain't right. It ain't fair. He did all the fighting. And I didn't even help him. I just stood there. What am I gonna tell Applebloom? What am I gonna tell Big Mac? Fluttershy's own eyes began to tear, her connection to the emotion of kindness, making her squeeze Applejack tighter. She hated seeing her friend suffer. Applejack's hat fell to the floor as her shoulders shook, landing between her and Naruto. The rest of the girls looked away from the scene before them, the joyous mood gone, replaced by somberness. Luna looked devastated, but Celestia. She was staring intently at the staircase. Clack. 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 Something was coming down the stairs. It couldn't be a pony. No one was there except the ponies present. Celestia looked at the crying mares. None of them seemed to register the steps. She nudged Luna to get her attention. Sister, do you hear that? Luna dried her eyes and listened intently, her ears twitching back and forth. It sounds like someone's coming this way and they're grumbling to themselves. Celestia nodded and kept her eye trained on the stairwell, trying her best not to disturb the grieving mares. She wasn't worried just yet. Naruto wasn't dead yet. He needed help, yes, but he wasn't dead. His breathing was shallow, his heartbeat slow. He was close to death. But Close wasn't dead. Before she helped him, she wanted to make sure that they were in the clear. The creature that turned the corner of the stairwell was one she'd never seen before, but she was used to them by now. She'd never thought she'd see one outside her dreams though. It was female, with long blonde pigtails trailing down her back. Her chest was massive and barely held in by a small gray shirt. She was solid, real, but the 6 mares didn't notice her. Only she and Luna seemed to be able to. Her breath hitched as the unknown female creature stopped and looked at Naruto, her delicate eyebrows cocked. One hand went to her forehead, covering the blue diamond that adorned it, while the other hand went to her hip, balled in a fist. Her foot was tapping an angry staccato on the tiled floor. I swear, you can be the stupidest, most dense idiot on the face of the earth, Naruto. Celestia and Luna were taken aback. It wasn't hostile in its words. It sounded sad and loving, full of care and disappointment and aggravation. They watched as she approached and knelt before the blonde-maned pony. Her once angry eyes softened and she sighed. Always leaping in to help before you know the situation. Always willing to put yourself in harm's way to help others. When are you ever going to be a little self-serving? When are you going to learn that you can't take the weight of the world on your shoulders? Her pale hand, with its manicured and painted nails, rose up and came to a rest on the side of his cheek. Her smile was almost motherly. I hate how you do this to yourself, Naruto. You always do this. You tear your body apart just to help your friends. When will you learn that you have to let others help you? What will it take? You were given another chance and you just tried to throw it away. A single tear slid from her eye and dropped to the tile below, simply dissipating ethereally. I can't be there to patch you up when you do stupid things anymore. You have to be more careful. I know you can't hear me, but you have to stop this. It hurts all of us to see you do this to yourself. And I'm not allowed to come again. You're supposed to be a peace here. Why do you always seek out trouble? The female's chocolate brown eyes closed and she leaned her forehead against his. Just be at peace, Naruto. That's all we want. We want you to be happy. You hear me, you stupid brat. Be happy, damn it. She leaned back and put her hands on either side of his head gingerly. This is the last time, Naruto. I can't do this ever again. You're on your own. I can't stand to see you broken and bloodied like this again. I saw it too often in that long ago time. Just be safe until we meet again. She pressed her lips to his forehead as she had done so long ago. The blue diamond on her forehead shimmered and began to disappear. Everyone gasped and stood back as the wounds on his body began to smoke and sizzle, the cuts closing and the bruises disappearing. They could hear the sound of broken bones mending, snapping back into place. The blonde female leaned back and slowly slid him down the wall, taking care to gently lay him on his side. To those who couldn't see her, it looked natural, like his body had finally succumbed to gravity. She stood to her full height, unbidden tears in her eyes as she looked down at him. Applejack exclaimed that he was breathing again with joy. Too soft for the spirits of harmony to hear, but magically carrying to the ears of the woman and the princesses, he murmured. "Ah-chan." "He'd never know," he said it. The grin that came to the woman's face threatened to split it and she wiped furiously at her eyes. Her form began to break apart and disappear from the feet up. As her torso began to mist away, she turned to the sisters, happy tear tracks running down her cheeks. I've waited so long to hear him say that again, damn brat. And like that she was gone. Celestia wasted no time in teleporting everyone out of the ancient castle. She had had enough excitement for one day. Naruto's eyes fought to stay closed. He hurt all over. He remembered fighting Nightmare Moon, but it was all a blur after she started slamming him around the throne room. Since he was alive and breathing, he could only assume that everything worked out in the end. He slowly let his gaze roll around the room. He was in his room on the farm. Suddenly yellow and red invaded his vision, and he was assaulted with a hug. Mr. Naruto was ridless and you old took you was scared. Naruto gagged and tried to breath. He hadn't known Applebloom had that kind of strength in her. Applebloom, I can't breathe. The little filly let go of him enough to where his windpipe wasn't crushed, but she wouldn't let go completely. He felt something wet hit his neck. She was crying. He put a leg around her and rubbed her back. He ignored the pain that it brought him. SHHH, it's okay. Everything's okay. Don't cry. I've told you before to only cry when you're happy. Applebloom hiccuped and giggled a bit. But I am happy. I'm happy you're alive. She leaned back now and rubbed her eyes, trying to calm down. I was so scared you weren't going to wake up. We all were. Naruto leaned around the filly and locked eyes with Applejack, Big Mac and Granny Smith right behind her. He gave them a smile and laid his head back on the pillow. Hey. Hey yourself. We were afraid we'd lost you. So I've heard. That was a right foolish thing you did, Naruto. You took on Nightmare Moon all by yourself. You should have died from what she did. I lead a charmed life. Applejack stepped forward and lowered her head so that their gazes were even. You owe us all an explanation. Princess Celestia told us a bit, but she said that the story was yours to tell. So, when you're feeling up to it, you owe us a story, Lieutenant. Naruto cringed. He'd momentarily forgotten about his little show at the celebration. There's not much to tell, Applejack. Her look of incredulity seemed to burn him. Really? Not much to tell, Seems like you're seriously underestimating your value to Princess Celestia then. He cocked an eyebrow and she tipped her hat back, a habit she'd picked up when she was about to make a point. Oh, that's right. You've been out, so you don't know. Right now there's 2 royal guards outside your door. There's 5 more out in the orchard bucking trees. We haven't done a lick of work in over a week because the princess wanted us to let her know as soon as you woke up. We've been watching you round the clock unless I'm in town selling apples. Those guards are working like they have something to prove. They guard the door like it's a matter of life and death. You have some explaining to do, mister. Naruto sighed and began to try to prop himself up. Big Mac ambled forward and helped him into a sitting position. His breathing labored for a second. Everything hurt. Alright. Let's do this before I lose my nerve or pass out. It had been hours since he told the Apple family his backstory. It hadn't been as hard as he thought. He trusted the apples. They were good honest folk. It had spilled forth from his mouth. Hour upon hour passed and they hung on every word. He told them everything. From being practically raised by the princess, to joining the military, to being her bodyguard. He told them what the medals above his bed meant, what he'd received them for. Military honors. Exemplary service. He told them everything. His trials as the only Earth pony in the 3 court guards. How he became a role model for newer recruits because, if he could make it, how could they not? He told them of his rising in the ranks. He told them of the things he'd done, the places he went. And Applejack shared the story of her adventures on the way to the castle and how Twilight Sparkle had figured out exactly which element they each were as their journey wound on. He chuckled and told her that her being the spirit of honesty was too much of a stretch. She always said what was on her mind, even when no one wanted to hear it. They'd left when he started yawning. Applebloom wanted to stay and keep him company, but Big Mac had shuffled her out, saying he needed his rest. Granny Smith promised him a big breakfast in the morning and left. Applejack turned before she went out and gave him a smile. "Thank you." The door shut and Naruto rolled over, pulling the covers over his head. He was asleep within minutes. He could feel himself being watched. It was annoying. All he wanted was to sleep and regain his strength and maybe not hurt so much. He groaned and pulled the covers tighter. Through the fog of his mind he heard a familiar giggle. He rolled over and looked out of a slit in the sheets, only to be met with 2 big twinkling, mischievous familiar eyes. "Boo." He yelped and fell off the bed in a tangle of limbs and covers and curses. Celestia laughed demurely behind her hoof and looked down at her gawking sister. The poor thing was still unused to how things were nowadays and stuck to her side like glue. "See, Luna. I told you my old student was quite funny." Another string of muffled curses came from the blankets as Naruto struggled to release himself and she thumped him with a hoof. "Naruto, language. There are ladies present." Chapter 4. The novelty of Naruto trying to get out of his bedsheet prison wore off quickly and Celestia put a hoof on top of the wriggling lump to cease his movements. She knew he had to still be sore and any movement was bound to keep him hurting for quite a while. She gently peeled back the covers until he was revealed and smiled down warmly at him, his big blue eyes peering out at her with an almost childlike and barely repressed wonder. "Hello once more, my faithful student. It has been so long since last we met. You remember of course, my sister, Princess Luna." Naruto nodded dumbly and turned toward the midnight-colored princess. She gave him an awkward smile and dipped her head. He nervously turned to his mentor and Celestia chuckled. "My sister is most grateful to you for your role in releasing her from her 1,000 years of madness. I dare say that if you hadn't been your usual selfless self, then our world would be shrouded in darkness now." And on that note. Luna took a step back now as Celestia took a step forward, frowning down at the Earth pony, who suddenly felt very small. "What you did was perhaps the stupidest, most idiotic moronic thing I have ever heard of some pony ever doing. Whatever in your right mind made you think you could take on a being such as Nightmare Moon is beyond me. I taught you better than that. I taught you to think ahead and you didn't. I taught you to plan ahead and you didn't. You just barreled into her and began to pummel her with your hooves. It was foolish, suicidal, ignorant." She found it was hard to keep up her words as she looked down at her former student. His normally proud and big frame seemed so small and frail as he weathered her dressing down. Deciding that she'd berated him enough, she leaned her head down and nuzzled his cheek. "It was also one of the bravest, most selfless acts of heroism I've ever been witness to. You faced down a goddess with no thought for your own safety, all to protect Equestria as you were taught and raised to do. If ever there was a pony that deserved praise, it is you. There is no reason for you to ever feel shame for what you did and I can never thank you enough, Naruto. Now, rise and stand proud before your princesses." With help from Celestia herself, Naruto rose from his position on the ground and stood to his full height again, ignoring the throbbing pain of his leg muscles. He bowed his head slightly to them. "I feel I am not worthy of such praise, princess, but you also taught me to be grateful for a pony's thanks. I am honored by this visit of the princesses of the sun and moon and humbled that you think me a hero, though my duty and loyalty to you is enough for me." Celestia shook her head in amusement and turned to Luna, who stared at the rust-orange pony thoughtfully. "I told you that he had impeccable manners when the situation required them. He can be somewhat uncouth in private company, as evidenced by his language earlier, but he's a sweet and gentle colt otherwise." Luna nodded. "Yes, you certainly taught him well, sister. I can't remember a pony with a sense of loyalty and duty as this one. And such fine manners. Yes, if he will accept my offer, he is exactly what I'm looking for." Naruto's back and legs straightened subconsciously as he came to attention once more. "What need have you of me, my princess?" Luna seemed hesitant at first, but a nudge from Celestia spurred her to continue, with a little advice. Remember to use your inside voice. Luna nodded and took a deep breath before speaking in a soft tone. As you know from your time as the bodyguard of my sister, the 3 court guards have dutifully patrolled the palace and kept order in the kingdom. With my banishment, my personal guard was more of a symbolic thing, under the direction of my sister, and only kept in place because of tradition. With my return to the ruling body of government, I have retaken control of my guard and am in need of some pony brave, wise, and with an iron hoof to lead them. She locked eyes with him and held his gaze. I would like you to consider this offer, Sir Naruto. Would you honor me by becoming captain of my guard? Naruto was dumbfounded. Captain? Of the lunar guard no less. It was something he had dreamed of since his induction into the ranks of service. To be a captain was something he had wanted and wished for since he was a young colt. But he sighed and looked away to the wall where he hung his medals and the empty peg where his necklace usually hung. The weight of the jewel against his chest felt comforting and he shook his head slowly. Princess, the offer is a generous one and any pony would and should be honored to find themselves in your favor. But I don't belong in the court guard anymore. I was discharged and I left that life behind me the day I left the palace. I wandered forever until the apples took me in. During my life as a soldier I felt content to serve until my dying day, but I didn't really know a sense of happiness until I came here. He turned back to the darker princess and gave her a small sad smile and a bow. I never imagined I would ever turn down an opportunity to serve my country again, but I must decline. My place is here, amongst my friends. They need me more than the court guard does. He looked up and flashed her his trademark grin, the one only he could do. Besides, if I leave, who is going to protect those girls when they do something stupid again? Luna shook her head and turned to look at her sister. Celestia told me that would be your answer. She said that the walls of the palace could no longer hold you. I had hoped you would say yes, but I respect your decision. However, my sister has a request of you. I would appreciate you hearing her out. Before I go, allow me to bestow upon you the blessing of the moon. She stepped directly in front of him and bade him bring his head to her level. When he had done so, she placed her forehead against his, careful not to poke him with her horn, closed her eyes, and spoke in the royal voice. May the light of Luna's moon guide your steps ever in darkness. If ever lost, may you find your path with ease. May your dreams be filled with goodness. And may your hooves always lead you to your heart's true desire. She smiled and backed away from him with a small curtsy. We hope to meet you again one day soon, Sir Naruto. Sister Celestia, we shall await you at the carriage. Farewell and good fortunes. Celestia waited until the door clicked shut before sighing and smiling in Naruto's direction. She always was a formal little thing and given to dramatics. Sir Naruto, I do believe she's taken a liking to you. That's not funny, princess. She was just being polite, as I'm sure she was taught to be. Celestia nodded, her smile still in place. Indeed. Naruto, I have a small proposition for you. It would only take a small amount of your time and you wouldn't have to do it very often. I am always at your service, milady. I wish for you to come by every couple of months and inspect the 3 court guards. With Luna back and commanding her guard once more, some of the pressure has been lifted, but I feel that the soldiers have become lax and lazy. They need someone to whip them into shape. Someone with great strength and presence. Naruto nodded his head. If this is what you require and it would not hinder my work on the farm, milady, I will do as you ask. I ask only that you send a couple of guards to work in my place. Applejack and Macintosh work themselves to the bone otherwise. When shall I make the first inspection? When you are fully healed. No sooner and no later. You've done enough for now, Naruto. Rest and recuperate. It was good seeing you again and I look forward to having you at the palace. I'll have your old quarters cleaned and prepared for you. Oh, and Naruto. Yes, milady. Did you sense anything out of place while you fought Nightmare Moon? No. I felt only a sense of righteousness and, for lack of a better word, peace. I've always felt at home in the heat of battle. But it can't compare to the feeling of happiness I get from working on the farm and spending time with the Apple family. And I'm quite sure that I'll have to be more sociable in the near future. Celestia nodded her head knowingly. Yes, you will. Especially with Applejack and her friends. They ask about you constantly, you know. I believe getting to know those you saved better would be good for you. Don't make me make that an order. Yes, ma'am. Goodbye, Naruto. If you need to contact me, seek out the Dragon Spike, Twilight's little assistant. Now rest up. He watched from the window until the carriage pulled away into the sky and pushed the door open, stepping out onto the small porch. The apples, who had been watching the princesses and their entourage fly away, turned toward him at the sound of his hoofsteps. Little Applebloom bounded up to him and latched onto his legs. You're walking without limping again. Yay. How long until you can take me riding again? Applebloom, don't bother him. He'll take you for a ride when he's better. He just woke up not too long ago. Naruto smiled down at Applebloom and patted her on the head with one of his big hooves, pushing down on her large bow and eliciting a pout. Just let me get my strength back and we can go whenever you're ready, little one. Could you do me a big favor though? He laughed when she nodded hard enough to break her neck. Could you fetch me a fresh apple or two? I'm famished. Applebloom practically beamed at the thought of being useful and darted off toward the orchard. Oh no you don't, young lady. You know you can't get those apples without help. Applejack ran off after the laughing filly, promising to return so she could get some answers. Big Mac watched his sisters run off and ambled over to sit beside Naruto. Both sat in silence for a moment, looking out at the two sisters disappearing over the hill. Neither looked at the other. My sisters were right upset that you almost died. I heard. I were none too pleased with you myself. I've already gotten chewed out by Princess Celestia herself, if it makes you feel any better. A mite. But not much. You're practically family at this point, Naruto. You're like another brother to Applejack and Applebloom. You're my best friend. And Applejack and I depend on you so much here on the farm. I never knew how much help we needed until you came along. And little Applebloom learned so much from you. If you ever left us I don't know what we'd do. Your drawl gets worse when you're upset. Did you know that? Shut up. I'm being serious. Naruto chuckled and Mac joined in. Both still refused to look at the other. Naruto sighed as he saw the silhouettes of the girls coming back over the hill with a basket of apples. You ever tell Applejack I told you this and I'll knock your head off. I was offered a position as the captain of the Lunar Guard. No sign of recognition came from Big Mac, but his ever-present wheat stalk rolled to the other side of his mouth. And? I turned her down. I had the opportunity of a lifetime and I turned it down. You know Applejack would skin me alive if she knew I turned down a request from the princess herself. Yep. She'd definitely tan your hide at the very least. But Princess Celestia had a compromise ready. Every couple of months I have to report to Canterlot and inspect the 3 court guards to make sure they're as efficient as they should be. I know that me missing work is a burden on you and AJ, so I arranged to have a couple of guards sent over to cover for me. Mac's half-lidded eyes continued to stare out at nothing in particular. Are you happy with what you've decided on? Very. Good. Then you ain't got nothing to worry about. Best prepare yourself for a few visits to town and at least a couple visitors here. I reckon you're in for quite a bit of socialization over the next few days. Socialization? When did your vocabulary perk up? Must be from hanging around you so much. Yep. Mac grunted and stood back up and started to amble off toward the barn. Once Naruto was healed up, the guards working in the orchard would be recalled. He wanted to get every drop of work out of them that he could. Don't be a smartass. And Naruto. Good to have you back. Naruto grinned as the girls cantered back up. Yeah, it's good to be back. Good talk Mac. Applejack cocked an eyebrow and watched her brother trot toward the orchards. Applebloom held up an apple with her tiny hooves and Naruto gently took it from her. And what were you two talking about? Naruto bit into an apple and chewed contentedly before swallowing and sighing. Oh, you know. Just guy talk. Naruto sighed as he watched the guards run about the orchard, fulfilling whatever demands Big Mac or Applejack had of them. He could hear Applebloom and her new friends Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle giggling as they ran around playing behind him. He was happy for the little filly. Outside of some school playmates, she'd never had any real friends. It was good to see her growing into her own. While the story of how they'd met was cute and adorable in Wetnut, he figured that he might have to nip this cutie mark crusader business in the bud sooner or later. His own blank flank might convince them that he needed to join their little club. Everyone had carried on without him while he'd been incapacitated apparently. When the doctor had assured them that outside of having general soreness and a bit of dry mouth when he woke up, he would otherwise be fine. Having heard that, they all carried on with their lives, coming in every so often to check up on him. The apples did a pretty good job of that, so everyone else was pretty much coming to watch him sleep. It was touching that they cared though. And funnily enough to him, Fluttershy had been the one to come by the most, being the closest to the farm and most empathetic of the group. She had hated seeing him be in pain. Of course, they all had responsibilities to take care of. And if there was ever anyone who understood the importance of responsibilities, it was him. Besides, what were they going to accomplish sitting at his bedside? He'd heard a couple of interesting stories from Applejack on what she and her friends had been up to. Twilight had scored all 6 of them a ticket to the Grand Galloping Gala, and even little Spike had gotten one. When she'd expressed a desire to get him one, he'd shot it down quickly. That night was hers and her friends' besides, he'd been to the gala every year since he'd been taken in by the princess. It simply wasn't his cup of tea. Granted, he'd never actually gone as a guest, per se, but still. He heard about their run-in with one of Rainbow Dash's old friends, Gilda the Griffin, and what a jerk she was to everyone, especially poor Pinky, who had only wanted to be her friend. He almost wished he'd been there for that. Not only for the pranks pulled, but to have had a word with his Gilda. He'd put a few griffins in their place before. It had been great fun fighting griffins. They had no sense of backing down from a fight. He chuckled lightly to himself and laid his head down on his forelegs. The sun was beaming down just right for a nap on the porch that afternoon. He awoke several hours later after the moon had already risen and yawned. He must have been more tired than he thought. It seemed that everyone else thought he shouldn't be disturbed. He stood and stretched his muscles. Tomorrow he was going to go back on light duty if nothing else. He couldn't stand laying around anymore. Applejack was going to let him run the stand at least. And speak of the devil, and she shall appear. Applejack cantered tiredly back toward the house, coming from the direction of town. Naruto watched as she yawned and traipsed up the steps, not even registering that he was there. Evening, AJ. You just gonna go to bed without saying goodnight? She startled and spun around to stare at him, his figure obscured by shadow, but his big blue eyes shone in the moonlight. She let out a sigh of relief. Oh, Naruto. It's just you. You scared me for a second there. Sorry about not seeing you, but it's been kind of a long night. How so? Well, you remember when I came back this evening from the stand and I was complaining about that Trixie character? Well, turns out two of her little fans decided that they wanted to see her beat an Ursa Major, so they went and coaxed one out of its den. Naruto was immediately in front of her, checking her for injuries. Applejack snorted and pushed him away from her. I ain't hurt. Stop being such a mother hen. Anyway, the bear came into town and started roaring and stuff, and Trixie couldn't stop it because her magic wasn't powerful enough. Twilight used hers to lull it to sleep with a lullaby, make a makeshift bottle out of the town water tower, and then levitated it all the way back to the Everfree forest. And Trixie? She ran off, still talking about how great she was. I tell ya, Twilight is really powerful. I don't think any of us really knew how much until she did all that. Turns out that the bear was an Ursa Minor, just a little baby, and it was cranky from being woken up. Still, it took a lot to do what Twilight did. I'll have to congratulate her on a job well done. Celestia always did have an eye for talent. Must be why she chose you for a student before Twilight. Naruto chuckled and shook his head. Nope, I was just an urchin she picked up off the streets. Ain't nothing special about me except for my strength. Applejack smirked and bumped his shoulder. Ain't, huh? I knew we'd rub off on you sooner or later. We'll make an apple out of you yet. Oh, before I forget. She reached back and dug around in her saddlebag for a moment before pulling out a decorative envelope. Ishish Faya. Fam Pinky. Naruto took it from her and took out the note from inside, spreading it on the ground. An invitation to a welcome to Ponyville. Thanks for saving us, you're all better, so let's be friends party. Pinky never has been too good at naming things. It's a party in your honor, for all the help you've given us and a thank you for saving us. Plus, you'll get to meet everyone in Ponyville because Pinky got the mayor to let us do it at town hall, just like the summer sun celebration. And yes, you have to attend. It's at the end of the week, so you've got a few days. But AJ. But nothing. You deserve this. We already settled on it and you're going. Every pony in Ponyville wants to meet you. But I arg fine. We'll argue about it in the morning. Good night, Applejack. Applejack yawned and walked past him, swishing her tail and knocking him in the head. Good night, Naruto. Get some sleep on a bed for once. Naruto nodded and stared back up at the moon. He wasn't sleepy at all. He had no one to talk to though, and it was late. He decided to take a walk through the orchard. It was nice out in the orchard at night. The moonlight glinted off the unharvested apples like light sparkles off gemstones. He loved being out in nature like this. He looked out toward the field he had plowed just a year ago, the various vegetables growing tall and strong. That was his handiwork. He wandered around the barn and found a good spot to meditate. He sat down on his haunches, clapped his hooves together in front of him and shut his eyes, letting all thoughts just vanish. He could hear the wind as it rustled tree leaves, the sound of one of the water pumps dripping, the sound of the pigs snorting in their sleep. Why the apples kept pigs, he'd never know. It wasn't like they served a true purpose to the farm. His steps took him to the edge of the farm, and Luna's moon was now at its peak. He recognized where he was. It was where Mac had found him all that time ago. It seemed like a lifetime had passed. Looking up, he saw apples hanging again. Licking his lips, he turned around and gave the tree a thump with his back leg to shake a few apples loose. Eek. Thump. Ow. Naruto froze and slowly turned his head to find Fluttershy on his back in a tangle of hair and limbs. Her blue eyes met his through her mane and she squealed again in fright, falling off his back. He spun and put a hoof on her tail before she could fly off, her wings flapping hard as she hovered. Now, don't run off. I'm not mad. Are you alright? You didn't hurt yourself, did you? Fluttershy lowered herself back to the ground and hid her eyes behind her mane, her tail curling around her feet. She knew that Naruto was a good pony. Applejack had said so and she was the spirit of honesty after all. But a crippling shyness got the best of her again. She chanced to glance up at him. Goodness, he was huge. He was almost as big as Big Macintosh and she'd never seen a pony as big as him. She began to panic again when he lowered himself onto the ground in front of her. He was still bigger than her even when laying down. Good evening. My name is Naruto. You're Miss Fluttershy, correct? Fluttershy's head snapped up a tiny bit at the mention of her name. How did he know her? He smiled at her unasked question. Applejack speaks of you quite often. She's very fond of you. She's told me that you're the kindest pony she's ever met and at times the bravest. Fluttershy's cheeks blushed slightly and she looked away. Oh, no. I'm not brave. Not at all. That's not what I've heard. It was very brave to approach a manticore. She turned her blue eyes to him. The poor little thing just had a thorn in his paw. It wasn't brave. I was just being kind to him. Sometimes the kindest thing to do is also the bravest, Miss Fluttershy. You sell yourself short. Speaking of kindness, I'd like to thank you for coming to visit me while I was incapacitated. I only wish I hadn't been such a bad host by sleeping. Oh. Oh no, you weren't a bad host at all. I mean, you couldn't help it after all. You're not a bad person. She trailed off as she watched his chest rise and fall from his chuckling. He was laughing at her. No, wait, he'd made a joke. She hadn't caught it till that moment. Her cheeks heated up again. Now, don't get embarrassed. I didn't mean any harm by my little joke. I'm actually very flattered that you thought enough of me to visit even though you don't know me. But you saved us from Nightmare Moon. It was the least I could do. I felt bad when I saw you with all those cuts and bruises. It was the closest I've ever seen any pony to death. She nodded meekly and looked away again. Naruto sighed. Miss Fluttershy, it's alright to be scared sometimes. To tell you the truth, I get scared all the time. She gasped and locked eyes with him once more. How could he be scared of anything? He nodded his head sagely. I'm scared all the time. What if something happens to the apples? What if something happens to the farm? When I was on my way to you all in the castle I was scared. What if I don't make it in time? What if I can't stop her? What will happen if I don't stop her? What'll happen to them if I die? Fluttershy just sat and observed him for a moment before it struck her. Weren't you afraid to die? Naruto shook his head. I was a soldier before I came here, Miss Fluttershy. I was the personal bodyguard of Princess Celestia. My life for my princess. I only fear what would happen once I'm gone. Who would have kept Nightmare Moon at bay until Twilight found the spark she was looking for? Where would the Apple family find a worker that can do what I can do? Fluttershy didn't know what to think about this pony. He only worried about others. He was willingly going to sacrifice himself just so she and her friends could live. It bothered her that someone would willingly throw their life away. It made her angry. How could you? How could you even think that throwing your life away is the right thing to do? Naruto was taken aback by her forceful question, even Marissa when she stood and glared at him. What about the feelings of those around you? How can you even pretend to think that your life doesn't matter? Princess Celestia was beside herself. Applejack didn't sleep until the doctor had declared you healthy and said you'd wake up soon. And don't get me started on poor little Applebloom. How could you think you don't matter? I never said I don't matter. I just think that if my life could give you yours, then I'd make that choice in a heartbeat. And I did. And I don't regret it. Fluttershy collapsed back onto the ground, her anger gone. What he'd said he truly believed. Kindness isn't just doing what others want, Miss Fluttershy. Sometimes you have to do things that they don't want you to do for them. Even if the cost is dear to you, you have to make a choice. That manticore could have knocked your head off, yet you went ahead and did what you felt was the right thing. And I know for a fact that your friends couldn't be prouder of you for having done that. She nodded. She knew that, even if she sometimes told herself differently. I didn't mean to upset you, Miss Fluttershy. You're a very sweet individual, and I don't like upsetting nice ponies. I just wanted to meet you and tell you I appreciated coming to visit me. He rose back to his full height and she felt small again. She just knew she'd offended him with what she'd said and now he wouldn't want to be friends with her. Way to go, Fluttershy. All of her blood rushed to her face when he picked her up by the nape of her neck and lifted her to her hooves. He gave her a small bow of his head and a warm smile. Now, it is very late and I have to get up early tomorrow, and I imagine so do you. Will you do me the honor of letting me walk you home? She couldn't say anything for a moment. Hadn't she made him angry? Why was he being nice? Her mouth tried to speak, but couldn't. Don't fear, miss. You didn't offend me. You just said what you felt was right. Never feel shame for that. Now allow me to walk you home. She nodded dumbly and he let her lead the way, staying by her side. Fluttershy kept her gaze on the ground as they walked, not wanting to say anything else. She was still beating herself up for her imagined offense when they arrived at her house. You have a lovely home, Miss Fluttershy. But I fear our walk is at an end. Do feel free to call on me if you ever need any help, okay? She stood there frozen as he smiled and turned to walk back to the farm. Wait. He looked back over his shoulder questioningly and she felt tiny again. Will you be my friend? I mean, you don't have to if you don't want to, but I. He chuckled and turned around to face her, his megawatt smile fully in place. Miss Fluttershy, of course I'm your friend. I can't imagine anyone not wanting to be friends with some pony like yourself. Now, it is late and we both have early days. I hope to see you again soon. She watched as he disappeared into the darkness and opened her door. Once she was inside where nobody could see her, she squealed, flying slightly into the air as her wings flapped with happiness. She had a new friend. A brave friend. A strong friend. Someone she could talk to who didn't judge her. Her day was already looking up now if she could just get to sleep. Naruto yawned as he woke up. It was still early and he'd only gotten a few hours sleep, but he felt great. He was happy to have met Fluttershy out by herself where he could talk to her. When she didn't have the judging eyes of other ponies on her, she opened up a bit more and the more she got used to him, the more talkative she'd be, he imagined. He stepped outside into the cool morning air and took a deep breath. It was a great day to get back on track again. He was going to do something constructive today, come hell or high water. The guards that were on loan from the princess stepped out of the barn and yawned, nodding in deference once they saw him, before stepping into the farmhouse. Granny Smith was already up and about and cooking breakfast. No wonder those guards were up so early. Home cooking wasn't a luxury one got in the palace. He imagined they'd be sad to go back. Plus, Granny loved cooking for everyone. She got a kick out of the way they devoured her confectionaries. The sun had risen by the time Applejack, Big Mac, and the guards wandered outside to begin the day. They saw him sitting by a tree and the siblings trotted up with smiles as the guards continued on to the fields and orchard. Morning, Naruto. You're up early. Not too early. Applejack, I have to get out and do something. I want to run the stand today. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Doc says you're supposed to rest up. I don't think. His answer was to lift his hoof and slam it sideways into the truck, making the whole tree shake. I'll be back to normal in the next few days, Applejack. Give me a break here. I'm going stir crazy. It's not like I'm plowing or anything. I'm just gonna pull the cart into town and set up a stand. No biggie. She mouthed his last words like a little kid and stuck her tongue out. Fine, fine. You've been a good colt for most of your downtime, so I'll let you do this. Do you know how to make change? He gave her a deadpan stare and Max snickered. She grinned sheepishly and rubbed her chin. I'll take that as a yes. Well, come on and I'll show you how to set up everything and then you can go. I wanted to get a few things set up around here anyway. Well, you're headed that way, do you mind dropping Applebloom off at school? Not at all. I plan to go in a little early and get some breakfast anyway. No offense to Granny, but I've had enough pie for the next couple days. I want some donuts or something. Pulling something with weight felt good, Naruto decided. Being able to put his muscles to use helped his mood immensely. Applebloom chattered on about nothing and everything as she walked beside him, her tiny saddlebags full of her school supplies. Naruto nodded along with what she said, asking questions where appropriate and laughing at her little jokes. It wasn't long until they had come into Ponyville proper and Naruto looked up at the sun. They still had a bit of time before school started. Hey Applebloom. Do you think that Sugar Cube Corner is open yet? I didn't have breakfast. Yeah, the cake's always open early. Can I get a cupcake? He laughed as she bounced ahead of him to show him the way. So long as you don't tell your sister you can. My treat. She ran off with a yell of joy, Naruto laughing as he trotted quickly behind her. The cart didn't even register to him and it wasn't long before they stood at the door of the bakery. Naruto unhooked himself from the cart and they stepped inside, the bell above the door jingling as it opened. Welcome to Sugar Cube Corner. I'll be with you in a moment. Okay, Pinkie. A pink head popped around the doorframe, revealing Pinkie Pie, flower dotting her mane like polka dots. She smiled at the little filly before gasping when she saw Naruto. Before he could blink she was in front of him, hopping up and down excitedly. Oh my gosh, it is you. Hi Naruto. I'm Pinkie Pie, but you probably already knew that because of Applebloom. I wanted to thank you so much for saving us back at the old castle from Black Snooty, so I decided to throw you a party. Did you get the invitation? I sent it with Applejack and she said she gave it to you and she's always honest, so I imagine you did get it, but… Her blabbering stopped when Naruto shoved a hoof in her mouth just as he did at the celebration. He gave her a lopsided grin and squinted his eyes. Miss Pie, it is a delight to see you under such civil conditions this time and I apologize for my rudeness, but I have to get Applebloom to school soon and set up the cart at the market before it opens. Could I get a chocolate donut for myself and a cupcake for Applebloom? Pinkie blinked as he removed his hoof from her mouth and took a deep breath. Wow, you really are strong. Not many can stop me once I get going. Well, the girls can stop me because they know how to, but others can't because usually they say my mouth is like a hurricane. This pie. My breakfast please. I'll be happy to speak to you at another time, but we both have jobs to get to. Pinky seemed to deflate for a moment before brightening again and nodding her head. Sure. I'll be right back with them. And now I know where I'm going for lunch. She bustled off to the back in a flurry of pink, leaving a stunned Naruto and a giggling Applebloom. Gee, Mr. Naruto, I've never seen anyone get Pinkie Pie to be quite like that. Naruto winced and looked down at the small yellow filly. Don't mimic what I did. It's rude to put your hooves on another pony like that. I just couldn't get her to be quiet otherwise, and we have to get you to school and I have to get to the market. Any other time I'd be happy to speak with her. From what Applejack has told me, she's a good mare, if a bit on the silly side. Yeah, I've heard Applejack say that about me too. She's usually honest so it doesn't bother me, but I wish you'd stick around and talk with me a bit. I understand you have to work though. Oh. Here's your food. Naruto froze when he heard her behind him and she leaned around his head from her position on his back. How had she gotten there without him noticing? Applebloom was laughing at him and took her cupcake in her hooves, biting down on the sugary concoction. Pinkie Pie giggled and hopped off of him. How did you get on my back without me noticing? How did you even get around the counter without me noticing for that matter? Pinkie giggled more and struck a karate pose. I'm a ninja. Fear my ninja-osity. Her joke sent her into peals of laughter, eliciting a few chuckles from Naruto as well. He finished the donut as quickly as he could without seeming rude and excused both himself and Applebloom. Pinkie waved goodbye to them and welcomed her next set of customers. It was going to be a busy morning. With Applebloom now at school and the stand set up, Naruto was ready to begin his morning. He wasn't sure how Applejack attracted customers, but he figured he'd heard enough hawkers at the market in Canterlot to get by. Apples here. Get your fresh apples here. Bucked and inspected by Sweet Apple Acres. He drew a crowd quickly enough, the sight of a new face among them making some curious enough to buy. Most were surprised to see him in such good health after a fight with Nightmare Moon. Most hadn't expected him to make it back alive. Apparently, rumors of his little coma had escalated to the point where his injuries had made it where he'd never wake up or walk again. Ah, gossip. Never satisfied with staying small. It always has to get bigger and better. A secret about a pebble can become a boulder by the time it's passed around. By the time noontime came around, he was getting a little hungry again and was just about to hang up his closed sign and lock up the stand for a while when he heard a familiar laugh. He poked his head over the stand's counter to find Pinkie Pie, Twilight Sparkle, and Spike looking at him. When he cocked his eyebrow, Pinkie Pie fell over laughing hysterically. Spike covered his mouth to hold in his own giggles, and Twilight rolled her eyes. They're laughing because your butt was in the air and your tail was swishing back and forth over the counter. His cheeks heated up slightly, but he quickly recomposed himself. He was nothing if not professional. Anything I can get you ladies. And Spike. Twilight put a hoof to her chin and hummed. Well, we were going to get some apples, but if you're about to go on break, why not come to lunch with us? There's a great little cafe just a couple of blocks over. Yeah? Please, Mr. Naruto. I want to hear all about your fight. Naruto sighed and closed the back of the stand up so no one could get the produce and hung the "Gone for Lunch" sign out on the front. It couldn't hurt to be a little sociable. They seemed like nice ponies and Fluttershy had been nice to talk to. Besides, they were Applejack's friends and if he was rude, she'd skin him alive. Sure. I insist it be my treat though. I don't like to let mares pay for my meals. Spike was careful to observe the ponies as he rode along on Twilight's back. He might have been young, but he was a good listener. It was how he always seemed to know things that the others didn't. He'd been told by a soldier in the palace one time that the best way to learn was to shut up and listen. He'd taken that to heart. Pinkie Pie was confusing to anyone. Not even her friends understood her from day to day, but she was a good pony and fun to be around. Twilight was a bit of a recluse, having spent most of her life studying and practicing magic, but she was coming into her own. Naruto, he decided, was a mystery. Even though the stallion was open and honest with his answers and gave them freely, Spike always felt he was holding something back. He didn't like mysteries. Mysteries made his head hurt. He knew Twilight liked them, but only so far as she could crack a book open and find an answer. An unanswerable question was her kryptonite. He'd seen quite a few drive her nearly bonkers. Not a pretty sight. As he munched on the sandwich he'd ordered, he listened to the three adults speak, Naruto especially. Twilight asked him all about his time with Celestia, and he was polite with his answers. Pinkie asked him random questions like, what would you do if you woke up and your mane was made of licorice? And if woodchucks can chuck wood, why don't nuns use nunchucks? Naruto had looked her dead in her eye and said the answer was that nuns used rulers. He'd never seen Pinkie Pie speechless before. It was pretty funny and scored major brownie points for the stallion. He felt he'd been silent enough though and asked the question that had been on his mind the whole time. Hey Mr. Naruto. What was it like fighting some pony like Nightmare Moon? I mean, it had to be scary since she was so powerful. Both Pinkie and Twilight stared at Spike's sudden question and he shrank back a bit. Naruto, however, just gave him a small nod. I just had a conversation about this with Miss Fluttershy last night. Twilight's head snapped back around. Wait, you had a conversation with Fluttershy? A nod. Shy Fluttershy. Can't keep eye contact for longer than 2 seconds Fluttershy. That Fluttershy. Naruto nodded, a small frown on his face. Yes, your friend Fluttershy. She's a very sweet little thing. She asked me if I was afraid of dying. The mood at their table turned somber and even Pinkie seemed subdued. She was the one to quietly ask what he had said. I told her that I wasn't afraid to die. I wasn't afraid of Nightmare Moon. I was afraid of what would happen to you all. Fighting Nightmare Moon was, to me, a thrill. I love a good fight. I feel alive during a fight. Mind you, she was going to kill me, but that's an accepted risk in a fight for a soldier. Twilight looked down at the table before her, seemingly finding the check pattern interesting. But Princess Celestia said that we're at peace now. We don't have a need for fighting or bloodshed. She said that such things were unnecessary in these times. Naruto nodded in agreement. And she's right. But think, Miss Twilight, what would have happened to you and your friends if I hadn't known how to fight? What if I hadn't been there? Who would have fought her long enough for you to work your magic? The sad truth, Miss Twilight, is that there needs to be someone capable of fighting to ensure peace. There needs to be individuals willing to do what is necessary. It doesn't make them bad ponies to be willing to fight. Soldiers are a necessary evil. Think about that. Well, you studied at the palace, didn't it ever strike you as odd that, in these times of peace, there were soldiers walking the palace? Naruto took a bite of his sandwich and chewed thoughtfully. To tell you the truth, I miss Poke. I don't enjoy fighting. I don't like to start fights. But I've found nothing that yet compares to the thrill of battle. Maybe one day I will. I've heard that love is like that. A constant thrill. He chuckled at his own joke and tipped his glass back, draining it. He didn't notice Pinkie Pie's unusually quiet self, her bottom lip pooching out in deep thought. Suddenly she brightened and slapped a hoof on the tabletop. You're just like me. He calmly wiped himself off after Twilight had spit tea all over him. Spike asked what she meant and she smiled at Naruto. When I was a little filly, I lived on a rock farm. We never laughed, we never sang, we never danced. My parents were strict and a little boring. I still love them, but I never liked that life. Then one day I saw a rainbow explode over the horizon and I felt happy seeing it. I felt joy swell up inside me and I wanted to share that with my family. I threw my first party for them the next day. They all loved it and I've been trying my hardest to make every pony laugh and smile ever since. She looked from one to the other before locking eyes with Naruto. I understand why you did what you did now. It was the right thing to do. You wanted every pony to be happy, even if you couldn't be. I want everyone to laugh and you want everyone to live. Twilight could feel a letter to the princess coming on. Who knew that Pinkie Pie was that deep? Thank you Miss Pie. It's nice to be understood every once in a while, isn't it? Naruto stood gracefully and gave the mares a nod. I apologize, but I need to be getting back to the stand. It was a pleasure to talk to all three of you. I'll pay for the bill on my way out. I hope to see you all at the party. Have a pleasant day. As he made his way across the restaurant, he figured he'd made a pretty good exit. It had been a good day so far. Hey Naruto. Catch. He turned around just in time to get hit in the face with something yellow. Something rubbery. He peeled it off his snout and could hear the restaurant laughing, his table included. He chuckled in spite of himself, dropped enough bits on the table to cover the bill, and walked out. He didn't want to know where Pinkie had been keeping that rubber chicken. He got back home without any incident that evening, all his apples gone and a bag of bits for Applejack to count out. Apple Bloom and her friends had ridden back in the cart, pretending they were pioneers and snapping the reins while giggling. He'd humored them good-naturedly. Applejack met him at the door and grinned as she leaned against a porch post, watching as he backed the cart into the shed and pulled the door closed. Have an interesting day. It was a good day. It felt good to get out and do something. I wouldn't mind watching the stand every now and then. I figure that you can put me back out in the orchard or fields after the party. That ain't what I meant. Fluttershy came by while you were gone. Said y'all had a good talk last night. Naruto rubbed the back of his head. Applejack was always smug when she was teasing someone. She's a nice little mare. A bit shy, but otherwise nice. She tried to give me a talking to, but we came to an agreement, I suppose. Yup. She told me about that. She seemed right excited that you and her were friends. Also heard you met Pinkie Pie and Twilight today. How are you hearing these things? I just got home. The little birdie told me. I'm glad you're getting on so well with my friends. It'll make your party go smoother. Now you just have to meet Rainbow Dash and Rarity to complete the set. Pinky invited the whole town, so I hope your leg ain't flabby by the end of the night from shaking hooves. Naruto groaned and moved onto the porch beside her. Don't remind me. Nevertheless, it was a good day today and I enjoyed hanging out with your friends. They're good ponies. A bit eccentric, but nice. Applejack grinned and followed him inside. Just wait till you meet these last two. A speed demon and a prissy pants. Oh, you're gonna have fun. Chapter 4. Naruto sighed as he leaned his head on his right hoof. Business was slow at the stand today. It was Saturday, the day of Pinky's party for him, and he still had yet to meet either Rainbow Dash or Rarity in person. Well, he'd kind of met Rainbow Dash. Well, this didn't bother him too terribly much, it did worry him just a tad. He didn't like to feel like he always had to look over his shoulder for them. 2 bits jingled onto his counter and he rolled his eyes up to greet the customer, only to have his vision assaulted by Technicolor. Hey, I'll take an apple. You remember me, right? Naruto blinked a couple of times and nodded as he wiped an apple clean with a rag before presenting it to her. Sure I do. I always remember pretty mares who call me snobby. Rainbow had the good decency to appear a bit sheepish, but it didn't last long. For your information I called you snooty. And in my defense, I've always heard first impressions are what you make of them. Naruto snorted and started to close the stand up for his break. So what do you think my impression of you was, Miss Dash? She beamed and took a bite of the apple, chewed quickly and swallowed. That I'm awesome of course. He gave her a half-lidded stare and disappeared behind the counter again to search for his sign, his voice floating up above the wood. No. Pompousness is what my first impression was. Narcissism. An overinflated ego. Rainbow nodded along with his analysis, not really listening, until she heard the words overinflated ego. She scowled and finished the apple in one bite. Hey. I do not have an overinflated ego. My ego is carefully monitored and maintained, thank you very much. I'm quite sure it is. In any event, I'm going to lunch, Miss Dash. Oh, cool. Where we going? Naruto gave her a sidelong glance. We? Rainbow grinned and nodded. Well, yeah. You took Twilight and Pinky to lunch a couple of days ago and I'd like to hang out a bit if you don't mind. Get to know you. Things friends would do hint, hint wink, wink. He gave her a slow blink and her grin slightly faltered before he sighed. Alright, you can come along. I suppose I'll at least be entertained during my meal. Rainbow trotted up beside him and he led them to his desired destination. I haven't had pizza in forever. This is really good. Naruto nodded and bit into his slice, chewing thoughtfully. They'd had some small talk while they waited for their meal to arrive. Mostly what her duties were with the weather management team and her friends around town. He'd stayed relatively quiet, but she was more than happy to talk it seemed, and she seemed to notice that. He hadn't thought her to be so observant. So I've yapped enough about me. You probably know all about the awesome Rainbow Dash from my friends anyway. Tell me about you. Naruto stared at her for a moment before swallowing his food with one gulp. What do you want to know? Well, I heard from the others about your viewpoint on being a soldier. That was pretty cool. It's a hardcore lifestyle and I'm really impressed that you did it. I mean, you were so young when you started and you personally know Princess Celestia. So, tell me about you. You and Applejack really are alike, you know. She wanted to know my story too. Alright, I'll give you a condensed version, since I have to get back to the stand soon. Rainbow was almost leaning over the table at this point, eager to hear his story. I don't remember much of my early days. I woke up in the middle of a field and just knew that I had to go toward the big palace built into the mountainside. I remember every pony staring at me as I walked past, whispering and pointing at me. I've always had these red marks around my eyes and they're somewhat strange, I suppose. Celestia just happened to be on one of her walks that day and I had no clue who she was. Big magenta eyes blinked and waited as he took a sip of his drink. I walked right up to her and when one of her guards started yelling at me, I kicked him clear across the road. Mind you, I was just a little colt back then. It was more impressive than it sounds. But Celestia wasn't mad. In fact, she seemed delighted to see me and called me by my name, even though I hadn't spoken a word. You didn't tell her your name? No, she just seemed to know it. I didn't even know it was my name until she said it. She's never explained that to me. I just figured it was some of her magic. She took me in and started to raise me, taught me to be a gentlecolt. She wanted me to pursue academics and I did. I soaked up everything she gave me, everything my tutors taught me. But I would see the soldiers training and that was what I really wanted. He smiled at the memory and she took notice of how wistful it was. They all laughed at me when I asked to be allowed to train. I was still small then, not much older than Applebloom and her friends, and I was angry. But one stallion said that I could join them. He was the captain of Celestia's guard at that point, and I would come to know him well as my commanding officer. He introduced me to the proper fighting arts, literature on the art of war. 1 ate it up. Her tail was swishing back and forth at this point. She hadn't been this intrigued by something in a while. Celestia was upset with me at first, but she relented finally and let me join the ranks. I didn't see her much after that until I became her bodyguard. I still think she had something to do with that. Not that I minded. I loved seeing my old teacher again. But before that I went on a whirlwind tour of the garrisons of the kingdom. We fought bandits, fought marauding dragons, and we patrolled the borders. Wow, that sounds so cool. Naruto chuckled and shook his head. Soldier life is pretty routine, but complacency is deadly in itself. I fell asleep one night on patrol and let some raiders get by me. The military is about discipline, and when the captain heard what I had done, he came personally to discipline me. I was his recommendation, you see. He had vouched for me to be in there, and by being lazy, I had tarnished his reputation. He beat my ass from one side of that fort to the other. Tough old bastard. A happy laugh rolled from his lips. Pretty much my only male role model. If Celestia can be considered my mother figure, he would have been my father figure. She taught me manners, he taught me how to be a gentleman. She taught me how to grow up, he taught me how to make it on my own. I had good teachers for life lessons. His grin fell and he looked off to the side. My little meteoric rise through the ranks didn't come without trouble though. It didn't matter what skills I showed, there was jealousy there. Rumors began to swirl around about me, and pretty soon I found myself facing the new captain of the guard. He just so happened to be the one I kicked all those years ago, and he had an axe to grind. He and his little cronies only had circumspective evidence against me for what I'd supposedly done, but it was enough to get me a discharge. What? But that's not fair. Life isn't fair, Miss Dash. It's okay though. I busted the wall out of his office when I left. I figured I was owed one hissy fit after all my service. Rainbow laughed and shook her head. And then what happened? Naruto shrugged and looked at the clock on the wall. Better wrap it up. I said goodbye to the princess and walked off into the sunset like the heroes in the books. Pretty good story, no? Rainbow frowned at him and pooched out her bottom lip, her eyes narrowed. That's not all. There's more to it. I want to know more. He dropped enough bits on the table to cover both their lunches and stood up. Life isn't fair, Miss Dash, and I have to get back to work. This was more pleasant than I thought it would be. We'll have to do this again. Thank you for your company. She watched him canter out of the restaurant and pass by the window, disappearing around the corner. With a growl, she was on her hooves as well and out the door. I got all the time in the world, buddy. I'll just keep looking you up until I get the whole story. Guess I can catch a couple of winks till your party though. Naruto sighed as he stepped outside his room and shut the door. Celestia's sun was almost at the horizon, and the sky was a plethora of orange and red and yellow. His necklace thumped against his chest rhythmically with each step. He couldn't bring himself to remove it, not after his fight with Nightmare Moon. It was like a good luck charm at this point, instead of a piece of jewelry. He still had a little bit before he and the apples had to leave for his party, so he opted to do what he always did in his downtime, meditate. He didn't have to exercise much, farm work pretty much kept him toned. But he needed to clear his mind sometimes, and meditation helped with that. Plus, he could feel something when he meditated, a small twist in the back of his mind, begging to be let loose. He sat down in front of the porch steps and got into his position, his eyes closing as he did. His breathing stabilized and he entered the trance-like state of being awake and yet not awake. He could hear and feel everything, it seemed. Water dripped into a bucket at the pump, birds sang off in the orchard, grass rustled in the pasture, he could sense it all. But what really intrigued him was the magic he could feel deep inside. He had no other word to describe it. It was similar to what Celestia and all unicorns used to perform their feats, but no matter what he did, he couldn't get more than a trickle to come through. He knew that his strength was already immense, even for Earth Pony standards. Only Big Mac had ever come close to him, and he knew that he was still leagues ahead of his friend. Magic existed in all ponies is what he'd been taught. Unicorns could harness it. Pegasi used it to help them fly and move clouds around, without ever knowing it. Earth ponies used it to help with their strength. It was simply the way it was. Magic lent itself to a pony's natural strengths. It's why Applejack and Big Mac could work the farm so well, why Twilight was a powerful unicorn, why Rainbow was so fast, why Fluttershy worked so well with animals, why Pinkie Pie was so. Yeah, just so. But he could feel the magic barely run through him, as if it sat behind a dam, just waiting to be let out. Ever since the princess had set him on the course he now walked, he had tried to unlock it, but he'd never succeeded. Patience, little Naruto, patience. Magic is like water. It can be guided and contained, but if you try to unleash too much at once, it is like a raging river and it will sweep you away. Unicorns use their horns as a conduit to focus the magic. You do not have such a luxury. It's one of the reasons earth ponies never bother to learn. It's too dangerous. He was different, he knew it. Whatever this well of magic was, he would harness it and use it to ensure that nothing ever happened to his friends again. In his mind's eye, he could see it. A giant wall with a tiny gold stream seeping out of a crack, feeding his body with its nourishment. He tried to will the wall to crumble, but something inside him made him falter. He could almost hear a wizened voice call out to him. "You're not ready." The image began to fade, and he slowly opened his eyes to find two big amber eyes peering into his. He blinked slowly and rolled his eyes upward. "Applebloom, what have I told you about sitting on my head? Not to do it." "But girl. Now, why are you doing it?" "Because you were sleeping and wouldn't wake up. I figured that if I did something that annoyed you, you'd wake up quicker." Naruto sighed and reached up, grabbed the filly with his hooves, and sat her down on the ground in front of him. "Well, it worked. Now please don't do that. It messes up my mane." The snort came from behind him. "Like you actually care about that rat's nest you call a mane. You're one of the least vain ponies I've ever met." He turned and gave Applejack a lazy stare as she stepped down off the porch with Big Mac in tow. "Well, that is true. I'd still rather not look like some bum you yanked off the streets when we attend this party." "But Naruto, you were some bum we yanked off the streets." The smile that threatened to split Mac's face would have been maddening to anyone not well versed in dealing with the apples and their overzealous use of truthful sarcasm. "I let that one slide because we have to be going now. Applebloom, would you like to ride on my back on the way there so your brother and sister can stop stabbing me in it?" She cheered and clambered up, not getting the jabs between the three in the slightest. Somewhere along their short walk into town, he'd picked up two more passengers in Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle. The three fillies chatted animatedly as the three adults plodded along. Naruto half listened to them as they went. "Man, Sweetie Belle, your sister went all out again on town hall. She didn't even reuse any of the decorations from the summer sun celebration." "I know, right? She's really excited to meet Mr. Naruto. She said that she'd never met any pony as brave as him and wanted to show her thanks. The only reason she hasn't met him yet is that she's been working on a custom wedding dress for some mare from Hoofington. But it's not like she doesn't go out for lunch. Mr. Naruto's been manning the stall for the past few days." Yeah, but Rarity didn't want to meet him yet. She always had some excuse. Something about she was a mess, her mane wasn't in order, she had a pimple, you know how my sister is. Naruto chuckled lightly to himself as they approached town hall again. Streamers and balloons lined the outside and it seemed as if the place was packed once more. He shifted from one foot to the other as the crusaders leapt off his back and ran inside. He didn't like being the center of attention, but if he didn't go willingly, Applejack would just make it an order. He stepped inside through the doorway and pinned his ears back immediately. The sound was worse than the summer sun celebration since it was an informal gathering and there was much laughing and carrying on floating through the air. Applejack nudged him inside from behind and he begrudgingly went ahead. He was instantly assaulted by ponies wanting to shake his hoof, introduce themselves, and generally make his head spin. He didn't remember half of them, even after they'd introduced themselves. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the ponies around him thinned out and everyone fell into their own little groups, chatting and conversing amongst themselves. He made it to one of the tables with some food, eager to get something to take his mind off this party, when he felt someone tap him on the shoulder. "Pardon me, sir, but I have yet to introduce myself to you." He fought the urge to sigh and slowly turned. He was shocked to find himself face to face with none other than Rarity. She was clothed in a stunning dress that seemed to simply flow out behind her, a tiara with rubies adorning her head. She gave him $1,000,000 smile and batted her eyelashes. "I do apologize for being late to the festivities, but I simply had to look the best for my savior. My name is Rarity and it is an utmost pleasure to speak with you finally." Naruto wasn't normally one to be impressed by one putting on airs. He was often very informal, only falling back into his Canterlocian upbringing when he felt uncomfortable or needed to be authoritative. But Rarity was making a genuine effort to impress him by being a lady, and he could appreciate that. Besides, it gave him an opportunity to see if he still had the ability to be a gentlecolt when needed. He took the hoof she offered and bowed his head enough to kiss it. "Not at all, my lady. I consider it a great honor to be in the presence of the spirit of generosity herself. The pleasure is all mine." Rarity seemed speechless for a moment, her mouth hanging slightly open. She was used to being the one to speak and act in such a manner. A smile slowly crept onto her face. "Such manners. It is so nice to find such a gentlecolt nowadays amongst all these ruffians. Would you kindly have supper with me, Mr. Naruto?" "I'd be delighted." Rainbow Dash slurped at her drink with enthusiasm, enjoying the show. She wasn't one who cared much for the hoity-toity show that Rarity usually put on, but this was gold. She'd never seen anyone who could keep up with the prissy mare's formal attitude, but Naruto surprised her once again. Twilight sidled up beside her, levitating a plate with various cheeses on it, Spike sampling them without her knowledge. "What are you doing, Dash? You're looking surprisingly calm." "Oh, I'm just watching our friend Rarity rope in Naruto. She's really laying it on thick tonight, Twilight glanced over to find Naruto and Rarity seated at a table, the white unicorn laughing demurely at something he had said. She cocked her head in confusion. "She's just acting like herself. I don't see anything wrong with that." "Nah, it's not that she's acting like herself. It's that Naruto is going along with it. He wasn't so uptight around me or you or the other girls from what you said." Twilight looked back again with a hum. "Well, no, but then again he was raised in Canterlot and by the princess no less. He's expected to act like a gentlecold. And AJ's told me that he's a stickler for manners. Little Applebloom gets scolded all the time by him for not being ladylike." Rainbow snorted and went back to watching the duo, her head propped on a hoof. Yeah. I just think it's weird." It had been quite a while since they had started talking, and Naruto really enjoyed himself. He didn't particularly like speaking like a citizen of high society Canterlot or Hoofington, but it was obviously a treat for Rarity to meet someone who could be genial and well-mannered. So, he indulged her a bit. He was a bit worried when she sighed happily and gave him a small smile. "I've really enjoyed speaking with you this evening, Naruto. I know that you don't usually hold yourself to this standard of speech, and I appreciate you letting me be a bit greedy tonight." "Greedy?" She nodded her head. "But of course. I consider myself a lady of refined taste and good company, like fine wine, must be treasured. I don't often have the company of a gentlecold, so I wanted to indulge myself a bit. I'm not normally so formal myself, but it felt good to pretend for a while." Naruto relaxed and gave her a grin. "I'm glad you feel that way. I'd have hated to keep this charade up the whole time I knew you. You're a delight to be around yourself." "Why thank you. I haven't enjoyed myself like this in a long time. Might I ask you a personal question?" "Everyone else has. I don't see why you shouldn't be allowed to. What's it like, being as strong as you are?" Naruto stared at her, puzzled. "I'm not quite sure I understand, Miss Rarity." "Well, you are quite a striking physical specimen, there's no doubt about that. I dare say that if you came into town more often you'd be beating off mares with a stick. Besides being strong you're also quite handsome." His rust-orange coat darkened just a shade and she had to restrain a giggle. He coughed into a hoof and smiled. "Well, I don't consider my looks terrible by any means, I don't see myself as anything special, Miss Rarity." She hummed and took a small bite out of a cookie. "Well, I beg to differ. I am considered something of an expert on how good things look. You obviously get enough exercise on the farm. And having been a former soldier, I can tell that they shaped you quite well with a rigid regimen. Actually, I know how you got so strong, but I need to see something else, excuse me for a moment. I'll be right back." Naruto watched as she stood gracefully and disappeared into the crowd of ponies. He shrugged and bit into his sandwich, relishing the taste. He'd met weirder ponies than Rarity in his life, and he'd already been told she was a bit eccentric. Applejack wandered over and sat down across from him. "You enjoying yourself, Naruto? Rarity's had you holed up over here for quite a while." "I didn't know what to think of her at first, but she's really a nice pony to talk to. I can appreciate a mare with dignity and class." "Don't look at me like that, AJ. You know exactly what I meant and what I didn't mean." Applejack smirked, but kept her eyes narrowed. "Sounds like someone's a little too impressed with my friend's attitude. I didn't know you went for mares like her." She couldn't help but laugh at that. Naruto was less amused and she waved a hoof to dispel his ire. "I'm just playing with ya, Naruto. Rarity's okay in small doses, but me and her usually tie up and butt heads over stupid stuff." "Where'd she disappear to?" "I was gonna say hello." "I dunno. She just excused herself and ran off. I figured she went to powder her nose or something." "And I did, amongst other things. Hello Applejack. How are you doing this evening?" Applejack spun and gave Rarity an almost too wide grin. "Howdy Rare. I'm doing great. You been having fun with my worker?" "Oh yes. He's an absolute delight. In fact, I just made a request to the DJ and she agreed to a certain song I'd like to dance to. Would you dance with me, Naruto?" He suddenly felt very put out. Sure, he knew how to dance, but it had been a long time and he was very out of practice. "I'd love to, Miss Rarity, but it's been a long time since I last danced and I'm afraid I might embarrass you." "Oh, not at all. It's all in fun, my dear. Are you familiar with the tango?" Naruto and Applejack both just stared at Rarity, who flashed a smile at Naruto and batted her eyelashes. He then took notice of the double bit draped across her back. It was made so that ponies could pull off the spinning moves of dancing without losing each other. This rarity. Please. But. Please. But I. Oh, please. He was amazed that she could contort herself like she was just to appear cute while she begged. Those big eyes and hopeful smile were a deadly combination. Applejack just shook her head and bumped Naruto with her shoulder. You might as well do it, Naruto. She'll go into a whining fit if you don't. Rarity took affront to this and scoffed. I'll have you know, Applejack dear, that I am a lady and ladies don't whine. We complain. Whatever helps you sleep at night, Rare. Try to have fun out there, Naruto. I'm gonna get some cupcakes and watch. Naruto snapped out of his little daze and glared after his boss's retreating form. This isn't a theater show. It is now. Ooh, I'm getting popcorn instead. Try to make it look good. Naruto let out a little whimper and his ears flattened against his head. Rarity took notice and her smile dropped a bit. If you don't feel like dancing with me, I won't make you, darling. He sighed and gave her a small smile. No. I don't mind at all. I haven't danced in a long time and I don't want to accidentally step on you or anything. And I sometimes forget my own strength and I definitely don't want to hurt you. Nonsense. Now come. I'm a big mare and I can take care of myself. Applejack sat down beside her friends and bit into the bag of popcorn, munching away happily. Naruto and Rarity had made their way onto the dance floor and everyone else had cleared out. Pinkie had wanted to dance the tango too, but Twilight had informed her that it takes two to tango and she didn't have a partner. Neither could figure out why Rainbow Dash was falling over herself laughing at that. Fluttershy settled down next to Applejack, her eyes wide, her voice just a shade over a whisper. Oh, Rarity looks lovely tonight, doesn't she? Applejack nodded and bit into her popcorn again. I wonder if she's thought about the size difference between her and Naruto though. I mean, not that he's fat or anything, but he is a bit bigger than her. If he forgets she's smaller, he might hurt her. Nah, Rarity's a big girl. She can take care of herself. I'm just glad it's her and not me. I can't dance to save my life unless it's a two-step. How about you, Fluttershy? Oh, no. I don't dance at all. I just imagine everyone looking at me and I freeze up. That's why I envy Rarity. She's so regal and she loves the attention. I wish sometimes I was that bold, but I could never do that. Spike snuck a handful of popcorn when Applejack wasn't looking and swallowed it quickly. Yeah, Rarity is really beautiful and graceful. I think you're right, Fluttershy. I hope she hasn't bitten off more than she can chew with Naruto. Max sat behind them all, his large frame allowing him to easily see over the mares' heads. He smirked and rolled his ever-present wheat stalk. Ayep. Naruto did every breathing exercise he'd ever been taught as he led Rarity out to the center of the dance floor, the bits in their mouths connected by a piece of rope. He hadn't done this kind of dance in years and he'd have to be careful not to whip her around too hard lest the rope break and send her careening into a wall. The music started and the two stood side by side, their eyes closed, letting the sound just wash over them. Naruto took one last breath as the music began to quicken and opened his eyes. He and Rarity turned away from each other with one hoof out in opposite directions, the rope between them tightening. With a quick tug of his head, he spun her toward him and the dance began. Rarity couldn't remember the last time she felt this elated about dancing. She'd never had so much fun. He was good, very good. He sent her twirling this way and that, always mindful of where the rope was. She had gasped the first time they came together and the rope hung limp between them. Fluttershy was right, he was enormous. Why, the top of her head barely touched his chin, but that helped when he sent her spinning and held the rope above her with a toss of his head. The music reached its crescendo and she could vaguely make out the sound of the ponies gathered around them, clapping and stamping their hooves to the beat. He kept her moving, never let her rest, and he himself was always in motion. She wondered if this was what it was like for him when he was fighting. He'd always been in motion against Nightmare Moon. The little more forceful than normal jerk brought her back from her thoughts and she clamped down on the bit harder. He truly didn't know his own strength at times. A couple of times her hooves had actually left the ground when he jerked her back towards him. But even though she was now covered in a thin film of sweat and would likely run home to clean herself, she was excited. Her heart skipped a beat when he pulled her in close again and whispered, "Hold on tight," through gritted teeth. She chose to take his advice and, as the song came to a close, he spun in place and lashed the rope around his right leg, pulling her in as well. Her eyes flew wide open when she felt herself lifted into the air and tossed, the bit coming loose from her mouth as it widened in shock. She was balanced on his hoof in the air, spinning like a top, laughing. It was electrifying. But the small toss, she was airborne again and came down into his waiting hooves. He pirouetted and sat her down on the ground again in a flurry of her skirt, the two of them bowing to each other as the music stopped. Time seemed to stop before everyone in the building yelled wildly and whistled, showing their appreciation for the show. The two dancers caught their breath and bowed to the crowd before making their way off the dance floor. Rainbow Dash couldn't believe what she saw. She'd never seen any stallion with that kind of stature be that graceful. Her hooves clapped unknowingly to her mind racing. Her big magenta eyes had been focused on the floor the entire time, watching the two move with an almost ethereal grace, only the slightest of misstep slipping them up. He was an athlete, of that she had no doubt now, and she was going to get her pound of flesh. She wanted to race, to hoof wrestle, to find out who was the best. Her competitive spirit had awoken, and she was now rubbing her hooves together in anticipation. Twilight had heard from Celestia that Naruto was capable of many things, that when he put effort into something, there wasn't much he couldn't accomplish. He'd apparently been just as studious as her in his formative years, but he'd opted to go the way of the earth pony and focus on his natural advantage, strength. Celestia had told her to be mindful that first impressions were not always true and that ponies always hid parts of themselves away. Naruto, it seemed, had so many layers she didn't know if she'd ever uncover them all. Inky bounced up and down on the tips of her hooves excitedly. Naruto could really dance. She hoped that he might show her some moves. Ooh, maybe he knew how to conga. Then every pony could join in. Applejack sat dumbfounded, her jaw slack. She'd known that Rarity was graceful and that Naruto had to have done some dancing in Canterlot or at least had watched enough to get by. But to be so good at it. And with Rarity of all ponies. Fluttershy's cheeks were rosy from watching the intimate dance. She couldn't imagine bumping bodies and getting that close to a stallion, even if it was just a friendly dance. She'd freeze up and fall over. But it was nice to see the two of them having a good time. They looked so graceful and happy. Mac just smirked at his sister and her friends and stepped back into the crowd, chuckling to himself. Naruto had just created his own set of problems in each mare, even if he didn't know it. He'd be content to sit back and watch the situation play itself out, get his 7 chuckles in. That was amazing. You, my dear, are quite the dancer. I can't remember the last time I had so much fun. We simply must do it again sometime. After thunderous applause from everyone watching, Naruto and Rarity had made it back to their table and sat down, both a bit tired and sweaty from the dance. Rainbow flew to their table in an instant, a huge grin adorning her blue face. That was awesome. So cool. You two were real good together. I've never seen anyone dance like that. Yep. Can you show me those moves sometime, Naruto? I'd like to learn to dance like that. Princess Celestia never said you were a good dancer. She just mentioned you being a jack of all trades. Pretty fancy dancing, Naruto. But can you two-step? I could always use a good partner at a Hitenani who knows not to step on my hooves. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly, the sweat in his mane sticing to his hoof. Rarity huffed and blew some of her purple locks out of her eyes that had come undone during their tango. He is quite a find. A better dance partner I've never had. Rarity replayed the dance in her mind as the others babbled to Naruto about his moves, reminiscing and describing his own dance to him in detail. She remembered the moves well. Her face contorted and her brow furrowed in a thoughtful stare. Graceful, but forceful. Strong, but gentle. Passionate, but passive. Her eyes flew wide and she declared in a lilting, melodic voice. Idea. And she was gone like a shot, out the door. Naruto watched her go with a raised eyebrow and Applejack just shook her head. That's Rarity for ya. Here 1 minute and gone the next. She probably just got some inspiration and went home to draw out her next project. Now, about that two-step. Naruto collapsed onto his bed back at the farm. Luckily, Applejack had declared they could all take off the next day so he could sleep in a bit. He was exhausted, but it was a good exhausted. He knew that his little dance would get him in trouble, but he hadn't expected to be pulled on the dance floor so often. Applejack made him two-step with her. Rainbow Dash wanted to freestyle, which he was horrible at, lacking the Pegasus's balance. Twilight wanted to slow dance since she was somewhat clumsy and didn't want to make a fool of herself. Pinkie Pie had demanded that he do the hokey pokey with her. He felt like an idiot, but it was a party and he didn't feel so bad when the Cutie Mark Crusaders and Spike joined in. He still felt like an idiot though, just less of one. He'd have to thank Applebloom and her friends for helping him there. Spike as well. He'd offered to dance with Fluttershy, but the shy little mare had refused, saying she didn't want to be a bother. When he couldn't get her to dance, he'd insisted on doing something for her and she relented to him coming by to help with the animals one day. That was good enough for him. He didn't want her to feel left out. And he wondered why Mac had called him a sucker the rest of the night. It wasn't so bad though. He had fun, more fun than he'd had in a long time, and they were all good ponies. Good friends to have. His eyes closed and he drifted off to sleep. Spike floated around the library, putting up books as he went. He was doing his best to mimic Naruto from the party, the way he'd seemed to glide along the floor. It seemed to really impress Rarity, and if there's one thing that Spike really wanted, it was to impress his crush. Twilight reclined on a cushion in the middle of the floor, her nose buried in a book, but she was secretly watching her assistant dance around their home. She shut the book and leaned up a bit, watching as he put up book after book. "Spike, what are you up to? You've been in a good mood all morning." He turned to her and grinned, a book in hand. "I just feel good. Don't you feel like dancing after watching Naruto and Rarity last night? I want to learn to dance too." She smirked and put the book away with her magic. "Calm down, Casanova. I know why you want to learn to dance. It's not that easy though. It takes years to get as good they were." But Naruto said that he rarely danced. And Rarity said that she never danced that well. "I read up on that a bit this morning. Some ponies are just natural dancers. Naruto is big so he has to lead and he does it well. Rarity always had to try to lead her partners when she's meant to follow. They just meshed well, that's all. They still made a few slip-ups that were really noticeable, but they had fun, and that's what counts." Spike turned back to the bookshelves and began to put the books away with much less enthusiasm. Twilight sighed and then perked up. "Oh, did you remember to send the letter to Princess Celestia? The one from last night about not judging a book by its cover?" "Yeah, I sent it before I fell asleep. I'm not that forgetful, Twilight. I do things right on occasion. What are you grumpy for now?" Spike sighed and kept putting up the books. "Nothing." She was about to ask again when the doorbell jingled and someone stepped inside. Strange, she thought, the library was open all the time, but ponies didn't normally come in on Sunday. It was the day she and Spike used to catch up on things. She brightened when she recognized the stallion. "Oh, Naruto. So good to see you again so soon. Wasn't the party last night just wonderful? I really appreciate you dancing with me. I know it wasn't the best dance of your night, but I hope you had fun." Naruto smiled at her and closed the door behind him. "I did enjoy it. It was a nice change of pace after the hokey pokey. And I'd like to thank you for jumping in with me on that one, Spike. I kind of felt stupid doing it alone with just Pinkie Pie. I really appreciate that." Spike brightened considerably upon hearing that he was a help. "No problem, Naruto. I'm always glad to help a pony in need and you kind of looked lost out there with Pinkie. Me and the girls felt kind of sorry for you, so we figured we'd join in. Besides, the hokey pokey is the only dance I know." Naruto laughed and patted the little dragon on the head gently, with great annoyance on Spike's part. He slapped his head fins back into place and crossed his arms. "Don't treat me like a kid. I'm not that little." Naruto chuckled and stood over him. "Well, you are that little to me. But don't let it get to you, Spike. I used to be a tiny thing back when I was younger and look at me now. In a few years, you'll be bigger than me. And when you're ready, I'll teach you a few things." Spike looked over his shoulder at the towering stallion. "Like how to fight?" "Sure, if that's what you want and Twilight's okay with it. I'll teach you how to defend yourself. You don't want to go looking for a fight. On that note, Spike, I need a favor from you." Twilight cocked her head to the side. A favor from Spike. What could he do that she couldn't possibly do to help him? "I need you to send a letter to Princess Celestia for me." "Oh? That?" Her ears drooped a bit before Naruto called out to her. "I'd also like to discuss a couple of things with you, Miss Sparkle, after we're done. You ready, Spike?" Spike stood with parchment and quill in hand. "Ready?" Naruto cleared his throat as Spike scratched a letter onto the parchment. "Princess Celestia. You've no doubt noticed by now that I have dismissed the guards from their duty at Sweet Apple Acres and they should be back in Canterlot by now. I am healed and will resume my farm duties for the time being. If all is well, I would like to perform the initial inspection in 1 month's time. I expect this to take no less than 3 days and no longer than a week to perform in its entirety. I request that when I do come that you send back the guards who I just recently dismissed as they are already familiar with the work and know what is expected of them. I will personally inspect those guards and review their performance. As another matter, while the help is appreciated on the farm, I am the apple's only worker and with me gone, so goes a considerable amount of time, effort and chores on their part. I request a small stipend be sent to them for my time gone. It would greatly help them out, especially in times of need. I await your orders and look forward to seeing and serving you once more. Your faithful servant. Naruto." Spike scrawled the last bit on the paper and rolled it up, sealed the edge with wax, and breathed his magical fire on it, the ashes whisking away on the wind to the princess. Naruto thanked him and trotted over to talk with Twilight. "Now, Miss Sparkle, could you please tell me all about how Canterlot is nowadays and who exactly are the captains of the guard? I'd rather not be in the dark when I go there." She grinned and closed her eyes. "I'll tell you if you call me Twilight and not Miss Sparkle. A fair bargain." It wasn't too long into their conversation that he heard Spike belch and spit up a scroll. The little dragon unrolled it and read aloud where Naruto could hear. My dearest pupil. All details will be handled with utmost care. 1 month is more than enough time to get everything ready. Your quarters are just as you left them and I've had them cleaned, so lodging is not a concern. The guards you requested will be dispatched with the carriage I sent to retrieve you. I shall send the stipend you requested for Sweet Apple Acres forthwith, and I expect the sum to be more than fair for your services rendered. The apples are a delightful family, and I hope that you will bring them with you sometime so I can meet them all. I can't wait to see you again, Naruto. It really has been too long, and my sister and I will make time to spend with you. Our royal duties will not hinder this if we can help it. You have done my sister and I a kindness and you continue to serve your kingdom well. I await your return with bated breath. Princess Celestia. P.S. Next time you send a letter, for the love of the heavens, don't be so formal. I taught you to have manners, not be a stick in the mud. Loosen up. Naruto sighed and smiled as Spike finished reading, a silly grin on his face. Boy, she gets onto you just as bad as she does Twilight. What if Naruto was immortal in My Little Pony? End here, and thanks for watching my video till the end.